City of Albany Social and Economic Justice Commission's meeting for October 6, 2020, for November 4th, 2020. We appreciate your flexibility of staff and of the attendees and of the commissioners. Normally our meeting would have been held yesterday, but we decided that holding it on Election Day posed a number of challenges for all involved. And we appreciate your engagement with this new time. So we'll call the meeting to order. Before we begin, though, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we're gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been Huichan and surrounding areas, including ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone and Bay Miwok, recognized in the Verona Band of Alameda County, whose descendants now include members of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people, and they have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries, even as they suffered from ongoing colonization and displacement. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands, and we strive to live in recognition of the ways that we ourselves may have benefited from those processes of colonization and displacement. So I thank you for your attendance at the meeting. I think we should begin with the roll call. Shall I call on people, or would you rather do it said?
Oh, I don't mind doing it.
Go for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Gary?
Present.
Commissioner Grossman?
Present.
Commissioner Kerr?
All the way here.
Commissioner Marks? I think she's saying yes.
I think so. You may be muted, Margie, but I think you're saying, we can tell that you're saying yes.
And Chair Downs.
Oh, we might have had a coup. It might have been a, I think Bart just got a second non-consecutive term, but I am here. Thank you for your attendance. We have all of our commissioners. We appreciate it. This will be one of our last meetings, presumably with a 5-person commission, since council approved an expansion effective next year with the next commission. But we're 5 for 5 today, despite it being a day when many people have other things that are pressing on their thoughts. Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes from October 6, 2020. There are draft minutes that appear as a hyperlink on the city's agenda page. So anyone who is watching from a computer or who is from a phone that allows them to click through the hyperlink can look at those minutes as well as the other documents that go with the later agenda items. So if we should take a moment for anyone who wishes to, who hasn't done so already, to review the minutes, and when you're ready, I will entertain motions on the minutes. We'll have public comment after the minutes, so I do see hands going up, and I'm delighted to have members of the public here, but we will don't do public comment on the minutes themselves, but a general public comment after this. So when we're ready, I'll be glad to entertain any motions on the minutes.
Move to accept.
All right, Commissioner Marks. Second. All right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and move to the vote. Unless Sid would rather, I can just call on people. Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
All right, so we have approved the October 6th minutes for our meeting. We now enter public comment, and then we'll have the announcements of the staff and commission members, and then presentations and discussion of possible action on matters related to the following items. So I know we have a number of announcements, but before we go into that, we take general public comment. As you can see, that where there is public comment on the individual items, both on the presentations and on the action items in number 6, this is this period of public comment now is for those people wishing to address the commission on an item not on the agenda. so that for items that wouldn't otherwise come up, the Brown Act limits the Commission's ability to take in or discuss items not on the agenda, but we are glad to receive public items on those issues. And on the issues on the agenda, we're delighted to receive public comment, but as they come up on the agenda. So I think if anyone would like to, I see 2 hands raised. And so if the city clerk would be glad to move them in. I see Jeremiah, and you should be on.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak and, use the freedom of speech and voice my opinion here for good of the city, because there's a lot of things going on. We've got people that need showers. We've got senior citizen people living in cars or RVs. We've got our own public parks without drinking fountains. I mean, imagine, you take a hike all the way to the top of Albany Hill. You walk all the way up that trail, you get to the top. Oh, shoot, where do I get a drink of water? Is there a drinking fountain up here? Oh, I mean, bread and water, we got to get down to our basics. If we can't provide, water for our community, we got to pick up our game a little bit here. Just maintenance and just taking care of ourselves, just showing some compassion and love for our community. The way these meetings are held, and we move to public comment on certain agenda items. And, when we're on the certain agenda item, it would be nice to say, hey, this is this agenda item, and we're opening the public comment for, 5-1, and I was going to get around to it today, but I was going to put up some signs, on Solano with the Zoom ID number for tonight's meeting and the time. And I just think more transparency about making this meeting available to the public, because you're all listening, and it's just people got to speak their voice. But how are people going to speak their voice if they don't know this meeting is being held? But the reason why they don't know is because nobody's really making it available. But Solano Avenue is a lot of foot traffic, and these big bellies, I've tried to clean a couple of them off. Doesn't seem like Public Works, has a power washer. It doesn't seem like Public Works has a bucket with some soap. But, I wish we had more street teams. I wish we had more volunteer programs. I wish we had more ways for the community to get involved, to get some volunteer work and be part of the community, because Solano Avenue could look really nice. All these storefronts and all these garbage cans, these big bellies. I've been mentioning it for weeks and months now, and they're still got cobwebs and they're still really filthy. We just want to take care of our community and keep our parks, with drinking water and all these programs with all the homeless outreach and everything we're doing. I know is appreciated in the community. So keep up the good work, everybody. And all your hard work is very appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments and for your work. I thought I saw one more person raise a hand. And if so, I think David Danby is being waved in, and you're live.
Hi, it's Julie. I have just a few comments. The first one is if somebody could just tell me or tell us, the audience, how many people are attending tonight, because we don't have that statistic on the way that we view the Zoom meeting. It just be, if maybe at the beginning of the meeting or somewhere in the meeting, somebody could just announce it regularly. That would be great, because it's I don't know how many people are, and I just like to know. I'd also like to request that the meetings, if possible, be earlier. I've had to change my my schedule, and I don't know about a lot of other people, but these meetings can run really late, and I think it keeps some people from attending or continuing to be at the meeting. And there's a lot going on tonight, and I won't be able to stay through the whole thing. But mainly what I wanted to do is suggest, to follow up on what Jeremiah said, is suggest that there be a community member task force that is created, that actively, in an engaged way, reaches out to the community in multiple forums multiple ways so that more community members are engaged by being informed about what's happening. There's no effort on the part of the city except for the emails to let people know. And the few times when I've made the effort and with other people, we've gone out and put up flyers, I think there've been more people attending, but I don't think that it should be up to random volunteer community members to occasionally do that. I think it should be the city, and the city itself is not going to do it. I can tell. So, it may just be that they're too busy. So I'm suggesting that there actually be a task force or a commission that's their whole job, is to let the community members know by, as Jeremiah said, by putting up flyers, by at various locations, by putting it out onto various e-trees through the Albany Village, through the school district, other parent groups, other community member groups. So they would have to look into it, and I think like a 3-member group would be good, and I think you would get volunteers from the community to do that. So that's my suggestion. It's really a disappointment to me that we have these meetings where there's really important issues and there aren't members. Actually, I have no idea how many people are here, but I doubt there are very many. And I think that's a lot of it has to do with that there's no effort to actually let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's 2 more hands up right now. There's a total of 27 people in the meeting. And Karen Zapata, you're being waved in, and you should be live.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I am joining I actually wanted to just say some congratulations to Janelle Gary, who's, I know, one of the commissioners with you all. And I actually wanted to do so because I do believe voting Janelle into office is actually a social justice issue, because Albany has a particularly difficult and fraught relationship, and I think history for African American people in our city. And if you look at the way that housing operated in Albany, it's literally African American people were not allowed to live in Albany. And so the election of an African American woman, I think, is very momentous, and I really wanted to take a moment to congratulate Janelle. She campaigned really hard and connected with a lot of voters. And I would also, just in that way, because Albany's history is terribly fraught in terms of racial justice, I would love for this commission to be called to include the term racial justice in their title, because if we're going to talk about the type of social justice and economic justice that needs to happen in Albany, it should include and have forefront racial justice. So congratulations, Janelle, and I look forward to your leadership in our city.
All right, we thank you so much for your comments and your suggestion. I don't see any other hands up from the community at this point. So we will then move from this part. There'll be public comment on individual items, presentations, and of agenda items for discussion and action later. And we move to announcements, some of this, one of these from staff and commission members. And I think we have a few. Actually, as I look, I see there were hands that went down and then have come back up. So before we move on, City Clerk, do you want to check on Nashani Brown, whose hand I think went down and came back up, if they want to be waved down?
Chair Downs, okay, I see it now. Sorry about that.
So there are two that have gone up and down for
Yeah.
Tony Brown and Peter Campbell. I don't know if there might be malfunction but they both were up when I called for public comment. And it looks like you're being moved in, Nashani Brown, and you're in. Thank you and welcome.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it went away like 2 times. I'm here to speak about something else later that's on the agenda, but I just wanted to say some more things about the land acknowledgement and how it goes beyond just acknowledging the land in the many tribes that are throughout California, but just sharing a resource and how we have many things that are accessible through the internet to learn more about the tribes in this area, the tribes of California, the people that were either fleeing terror to come here, people that have recently migrated here. So there's a lot more that we have to acknowledge as well. And when we acknowledge these people, we recognize that they're still here and that their descendants are still thriving. So thank you for the first step. But as a community, as a commission group, as the whole city, and everyone has work to do. So I just wanted to say that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. And I've also seen Peter Campbell's hand was up and then down and is back up. So if we could make sure that we wave him in, and you are here and you're alive. Thank you.
Thank you. You didn't acknowledge me, so I flashed it several times to make sure I got acknowledged. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. Jeremiah always makes interesting comments at these meetings, and I appreciate his input. I think the citizen input, the input to the citizenship, and from I think it's important to realize that we as citizens have a responsibility to take care of some of these things on our own. The city can't hold our hand in absolutely everything that goes on in the city. So I just want to make a point that it's important that the citizens of Albany take responsibility for some of these things, as well as expecting the government to do things for us. It's just not going to happen. And then as far as the notice to the public, for emails to be notified about these meetings, and all they have to do is check on the city website, I believe, and they can sign up for these emails. So I think the methods are pretty well known. I don't think the city can do much more short of sending a mailing to everybody in the city repeatedly at high cost. It's just not feasible to do that.
All right. Well, we appreciate those comments.
Hands and not expect-
Oh, I'm sorry. You have more time if you're speaking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just saying. Yeah, and I think it's just that we as citizens have a responsibility to be engaged and do things on our own without expecting the city to do everything for us. That's all.
Right, thank you for that comment. And I see one more hand, and then we'll go to announcements. I see Cheryl Suddeth. I think the city clerk is moving you in, and you're live. Thank you.
Good evening. I actually was just going to listen, and then the last comment prompted me to speak. Good evening. Felicidades, Ms. Janelle. Congratulations. You know, and I've spoken here before, and I will continue to say this. I always find it interesting how when I look at this group that is supposed to be about equity and fairness, and it's quite reflective of Albany, but it is not reflective of what we look for when it comes to racial and social justice, when it comes in Albany. And I will continue to say that I'm glad the young lady spoke about when you speak of this land being the land of the Ohlone people. It takes more than just reciting words. We also must put action behind that, because the Ohlone people and its descendants are still here. So it takes some more action behind just those words. I often hear people do that type of recitation, but I do not hear people say what they're going to do to ensure that we respect the land in a more proactive way, to ensure that the people who this land was stolen from are treated in a more equitable fashion. So I would give you that charge, that we look for a way to honor the Ohlone people in a much more proactive way than just saying words. I will say that the last person who kept using the word citizens may think more along the way of thinking that your words have meaning and power. And maybe you want to use the word the residents of Albany. If you want to talk about the sanctuary nature of the city of Albany, not everyone may be a citizen. Some may just be residents of this fine city. So, yes, people have responsibility, but people have lots of responsibilities. And if you want to talk about openness and inclusiveness, it does not hurt this city to send a notice to people to advise them and to remind them of this meeting. If it is truly the intention to be inclusive and to advise people that this is what this city is aiming for, is to reduce the amount of racism, classism, sexism, ableism that is going on within the four corners of this 1 square mile. If it is not the intention, then go ahead and keeping it as quiet as possible. Because I can tell you that I have a lot going on myself. I go to a lot of meetings every week and every day. And I think that it is not a hard thing to do than to send a reminder and to put up posters. If that is our intention as a community, is to come together in unity, then a reminder is not that hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment. All right, so we appreciate the public's comments today and always. And we are now moving toward staff and commission member announcements. We'll do staff and then commissioners. So staff, do we have any staff announcements today?
Sorry about that. Yes, I have a reminder that we are now accepting applications for the next term to serve on a city advisory body to the city council. So interested current members will need to reapply, as well as any residents interested in participating. The upcoming 2-year term will run December 20th through December 2022. And if you'd like more information on an application, you could visit the city website, or the direct link to the page is albany.org/advise. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Any other, and an important and timely reminder that all positions become vacant as we turn from December through January. And so throughout this commission, as well as I believe all commissions, there are applications available on the city website, as Sid said, and we encourage everyone who's interested to apply. Any other staff announcements? I don't see any. Okay, as a couple of our public suggested, we have, election tallying continues, so we don't have any formal outcome, but we are pleased to be joined by one of the candidates who was, in our previous city elections, and look forward to the completion of the count as California goes through its process, and appreciative of everyone who ran in elections and of the amazing turnout in the vote as it's coming to be clear. So do we have any announcements from commissioners?
I have a question. Is that okay? Okay, so I wanted to ask Sid, I know he made the announcement about the open commissions and boards. And I know we are advertising it online on Facebook, but how are we reaching out, or are we reaching out to the residents in the village? How are they are they being included? Are we reaching out by having flyers there? Just trying to see how we're reaching out to the entire community and making sure that everyone has that opportunity to be a part of a commission or board.
So what I can say is, and Sid, if you have anything else to add,
Sure.
the city recently sent out a mailer to all Albany residents, and there was information in that mailer specifically on all of the advisory boards that the city currently has, and that there would be a time. The time was coming for the city to accept applications. So that mailer went to all households in Albany, including UC Village residents.
Okay, and one more question. And as far as, advising them on what that means, what that looks like, some people, they may look at the application and say, they're confused or they don't understand. Is there some type of Zoom meeting to kind of educate people on, maybe what the term consists of, what they would be doing, any type of description of what you're looking for? I mean, can that be some type of educational moment for people to really understand the process and what is needed to serve on these commissions and boards?
All that information is on our city website, as far as the role of each of the commissions and how to apply. And I think the point of contact for any questions is the city clerk.
Oops, sorry. And I guess my point is just to try to get that interaction with staff, so they'll want to be a part. We can read so much on website, but it would be good if we could hold something where we invite the community in and say, look, this is what we're looking for, actively marketing to bring different people of multi-level cultures to come and be a part of our commissions and boards. So that's all. I'm just trying to get us to be more, active, to bring in the community in and participate in being a part of the commission. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner announcements? Commissioner Kerr.
Yeah, I just have three quick comments. One is that the living wage ordinance update from the city council is that there will be a presentation on the living wage, which was passed in 2008, sometime in the early first quarter of 2021. So this is an ordinance that was very much worked on by Commissioner Marks and Commissioner Grossman and myself in 2008, and it was passed. And I'm assured that from the council and from the staff of the city that this will be updated, and there will be a new calculation of the living wage in Albany sometime in early 2021. So that's something I very much look forward to. The second update, the second of three updates that I have, is that I have not heard from staff any update on mental health services within the city. I'm hoping that we will have an update soon, that we will understand whether the County of Alameda or the City of Berkeley is going to provide crisis intervention services ongoing, or whether we will be looking for an alternate source of those kinds of services. Certainly that is particularly sensitive and important issue as we stand right now. And finally, well, that's it for now. There's no third item. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I see Commissioner Gary.
Yes, it's me again. So first, I want us to acknowledge the Black Lives Matter group that has been every Thursday going out reminding us that there's still issues in our city, there's still issues in our countries, and they continue to go out and let it be known that Black Lives Matter, that we need to continue to work on trying to unite this community. So I appreciate them going out every Thursday for an hour to continue to put the work in, because we don't need this to drop. We need to continue to move and try to make sure that we're moving progressively. The second thing I had was, I forgot. So I will wait and think about it. Sorry.
All right. If it occurs to you, come back in. But appreciate all those announcements. Not seeing others, we will move to agenda item 5 on our agenda. This is presentations. We have one presentation. It's listed under 5-1 on your agenda. And if you look at the hyperlinks, you can see that there is both a presentation document as a hyperlink and also below that a status report document as a hyperlink. So there are 2 documents that are part of the public record to accompany this. And I believe that we also have a speaker from ECHO who is here to give us the update. And I think I see staff bringing in Jonathan Torres. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to give first.
All right.
Jonathan, yeah, I'm going to go first. Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Downs and Commissioners. I'll be giving a brief overview of our engagement with the community, which is almost always their initial contact regarding our rent review program. And then you'll receive a presentation from our program administrator, ECHO Housing. Our outreach methods of the program continue to be electronic, in-person, and via the telephone. Posters and flyers are posted at all city facilities, and obviously that was pre-COVID. During COVID, we continue to canvass our electronic media sources and through telephone inquiries from our city information hotline and, of course, Albany Cares. This past year, we had 28 rent review engagements with landlords, 38 engagements with tenants, and 12 engagements with others, which could have been property managers, relatives of tenants or landlords or friends. Highlighted topics of engagements included ordinance overview, rent increases during COVID from both landlords and tenants, program costs, maintenance issues, deferring rent payments during COVID, and eviction processes. That's just a partial list of our intake engagements. When we got those, we answered questions, gave information, and made referrals to ECHO Housing and other community resources when appropriate. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan Torres, who is the Housing Programs Coordinator from ECHO Housing. And we really appreciate you being here with us tonight, Jonathan. I'm going to go ahead and run your slides for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this evening. So as Sid mentioned, I'm the Housing Programs Coordinator at ECHO Housing. And so this is going to be a brief presentation regarding what we do in addition to what we've done with the Albany Rent Review Program. Next slide, please. So just a brief history, ECHO Housing was founded in 1964 and incorporated in 1965 by community volunteers dedicated to eco housing and opportunities and the prevention of and elimination of homelessness. So we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency and a qualified fair housing enforcement organization. We provide services throughout the county of Alameda, Contra Costa, and Monterey County. And then there's my contact information. If you guys want to reach out to me directly, have specific questions that you guys want to ask me about the Albany rent review. I'm also willing to have conversations with regards to the more greater policies that are in place, such as the county's moratorium, as well as the state Assembly Bill 3088. Which also impacts tenants or provides more protections to tenants as well. So I welcome those questions if you guys have any, and just feel free to call me or send me an email. So just a little bit about the rent review program. The rent review ordinance became effective November 2nd of 2018. And so our role at ECHO Housing is really to provide the education, counseling, the conciliation and mediation on the ordinance to tenants, landlords, and property management companies. So in this past year, we've had a total of 7 inquiries. 1 was from a landlord and 5 was from tenants. And so Out of those 7 inquiries, we provided counseling to 6 of those, meaning that, the tenants or the landlord essentially wanted to get in-depth information about the process of what has, in terms of the Albany rent review. And we didn't have any mediations or conciliations, and I can talk about later on why that is. So in terms of the tenant counseling prior to the conciliation, the total number of households qualifying for the rent review due to proper service is 2 households. And so in part of the ordinance, there is a set of procedures that landlords or property management companies have to follow in order to allow the review or the process to occur. And so out of those, only 2 of them actually qualified. The other 4 did not qualify for the rent review program, and that was because the tenant really wasn't served properly under the ordinance. And so, as I mentioned, there is a set of procedures. Generally, we consider this to be a defective service, and generally that's because they forget to provide the notice availability of rent review, which is the more common one, or the common issue, because when you talk about property management companies and they say, well, I'm following state regulation. And yes, you should follow state regulation, but you should also follow what is outlined in the ordinance. And sometimes, when you talk to private owners, they're unaware that this ordinance exists, or there's a different set of procedures that they need to follow. So four out of this 6 obviously did not qualify because it was improper service, which also means that there was not an increase that was occurring, because you can't have an invalid service and then have an actual valid rent increase to occur. Next slide. And then of the conciliations, 2 of the households were eligible for conciliation, but both households decided not to engage in conciliation. And that's, obviously I can't discuss really why that was the case, given the fact that I can't disclose their information. But, when we discuss with landlords and tenants regarding the conciliation process, sometimes they recognize that maybe that isn't for them. They probably just wanted to figure out, was the notice valid? Is there a way that you can stop my rent increase? For sure. And generally the answer is we can stop it only if it's invalid. But if the process is valid, and the landlord chooses, the landlord decides that they're going to go through conciliation and then mediation, without a binding contract forcing them to accept an agreement, tenants tend to just stop there. And so in this particular case, both households just decided that they didn't want to engage in the conciliation at that point. And then what we were also doing is we were preparing to host workshops to educate the public in regards to the overlap between the Albany Rent Review Program as well as AB 1482, which was in effect January 1st of this year. And AB 1482, if you're unfamiliar with it, provides statewide protections with regards to rent caps, as well as just cause protections. And so, a lot of the questions that we've received outside of Albany have really been for jurisdictions who are asking, what is the similarities? What is the differences? How do we apply both of them? And so our goal in 2020 was obviously that we wanted to have these workshops, because we always feel that when you have housing policies that impact communities, we want to make sure that they're educated so at least they know the process or where they can get the resources to get get the assistance to find or potentially find solutions to those. But obviously, due to the pandemic, workshops have been put on hold. Generally, we like to host our workshops in person. My experience has been that when you host these in person, people put a face to you instead of just talking over the phone. We have been hosting these monthly workshops just for the greater Alameda County with regards to the Alameda County Emergency Ordinance and how that's applicable to certain jurisdictions, but that's on our Zoom platform. And I'm just gonna have questions and answers, from anybody.
Bart.
Okay, I have a couple of things. First of all, Jonathan, there's in these two documents, one says rent review engagement, landlords 28, tenants 38, and others 12. And the other one says 2 services to households and 4 due to improper. At any rate, what's the discrepancy between these numbers?
So what I'm gonna, I think what the first set that Sid provided is based off of what residents are going directly to the city. And then the second list that you're provided is essentially what people come to us directly. So the city is collecting their own data based on folks who go through their end. And then, the city has asked us to collect the data from our end.
So sorry about that, Commissioner Grossman. I tried to answer and I was still muted, so I apologize about that. Yeah, so that's the initial intake that we're taking. We're taking those calls, and a lot of the times, I'm able to answer questions or make recommendations to talk to one another, or if it's something that I can't directly, it's too detailed, then that's when I make that referral to Echo Housing.
Let me come back to that because I have a question about
that.
Okay. In terms of, you mentioned that there are cases where there's been improper notification and therefore rent increases are out of order. Do you follow up to see that in fact there is no rent increase?
Yeah, so well, not that I follow up. I always tell either the resident who calls or even the landlord, and I say, look, if you receive another notice of rent increase, send it to me directly so I can review it. But if you don't receive anything and, based on the fact that it's defective for some form, then don't worry about the rent increase right now. The only way they should worry about the rent increase is if the process is correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I also make it a habit of I always ask residents for permission to contact the landlord to explain to them the process, because this is a 2-prong approach, educating the resident, but also educating the landlord or the property management company of the process.
So we really don't know exactly what happens after these things unless somebody gets back in touch with you.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of the 2 events that you were going to do and then had to cancel, really the fact that you like to do these in person is not such a good reason. I mean, we like to have these meetings in person too, but nothing's happening in person right now. And it seems that very few people are using this service. And these events were part of the intention in terms of making people aware of the service. So I would encourage you to find a way to do it, even if it's not in person.
Yeah, that most definitely, that's something that I can discuss with Sid with regards to perhaps creating, a Zoom workshop specifically for Albany over the topics that we just discussed.
Okay. And I am concerned as to why the numbers are so low. You indicated that you could explain some of that, so I'm interested in, why it is that when people aren't doing mediation. We've been at this for 2 years, and the numbers have really been minuscule.
So I can answer part of that, and that part is that our contract between Echo Housing and the city is a fee for service, specifically to run the Albany rent review. So we only bill you for the time that we spend on these cases. Some of the times we do have residents from Albany who contact us who are outside of the scope of the Albany rent review, and that doesn't get billed to you guys directly. But in terms of why the numbers are low, that's a question of, perhaps there's folks who aren't needing or might not know that there is a rent review process.
But you're saying the expenses were $99,000, and only 7 people were served. So that
our agency didn't charge that amount. So we send our invoice to the city, and it's way less than that. So I'm not sure that expense sheet that you're viewing probably is the expense sheet from the city of what it's costing the city on their end, but not on Echo's end.
Well, Sid, what does that mean? Why is it costing more than it's costing?
If I could answer that, yes, Commissioner Grossman. So basically, the expenditures include salaries, which include everybody in the city that's working on the rent review program, services, which is a contract with Echo Housing, and supplies, so mailers, literature, and other types of supply expenses.
So basically, it's cost allocation.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to answer, why are the numbers so low? Getting to Echo from me, once again, we do quite a bit of triage. And the first thing I mentioned to either the tenant or the landlord during the process is, do you have a relationship where you could talk about what's going on? So a lot of them might be resolved even before they make that next step going to Echo.
I wonder, though, and this is obviously something for you to think about together, the two of you. If you're dealing with a lot of these yourself, then they don't have contact with Echo. If they don't have contact with Echo, it may be less likely that they will move forward with mediation or conciliation. They haven't really had an interaction with the agency. So it seems, Sid, like you're doing a lot of the work.
Well,
that
every one of
referring.
Yeah, every one of my intakes gets referred to Echo after the process of me triaging with them.
Yeah.
And then always the conversation ends where, please let me know how it goes. Let me know if I could do anything else.
Okay.
I do want to add something, and I think that this is from our experience of doing tenant landlord counseling and fair housing investigations, is a majority of these cases don't need mediation or conciliation because the process is defective. To even get there, the process has to be correct. The landlord has to have served the tenant the proper notice for a rent increase. Given the fact that we are under AB 1482, so that rent increase is going to be the 5% plus the CPI, the Albany rent review is a 5% threshold. And so sometimes if I have a conversation with a landlord who's called or a tenant who's called, I always tell them, there's various options you can explore. If you can negotiate with your landlord without having to have a middle person do it, that's going to give you the power and the tools to be able to control the dynamics between you and your landlord. Our role isn't always to interject ourselves in every single case because we recognize that not every case requires us. So when they do contact us, I make the best effort to provide them the best tools, the best knowledge, the best resources to ensure that they're getting the best outcome possible. But to get to the conciliation or the mediation requires quite a few steps. And the majority of the time, and this is across the board on our agency, with any rent review or notice of termination, to get them out or to get it to be effective, the process needs to be correct.
Okay. That's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart. I think there are other questions today. I see Commissioner Kerr.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for a very interesting and informative presentation. I'm willing to go out on a little bit of a limb here and say that Albany's rent review program is perhaps just a toe in the water of what we could be doing in terms of helping renters in the city of Albany. And I wonder if you would be willing to take not much time, but just a quick summary of what your agency is able to provide to other municipalities with rent control issues, and what we might look for and what we might strive to achieve in terms of enhancing our rent review program and our rent control if we were to go that way, helping people who are renters. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Take it.
Yeah, so one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that we currently don't have a contract where we're dealing with rent control. We do have other contracts where we deal with rent review processes, such as the one in Union City, and it's not capped. And I think the complexity of this is given the fact that Governor Newsom signed last year AB 1482 that puts that cap. So it already puts a restriction on certain types of units. So the difficulty here, I think, is how do you start applying all of these policies and it makes sense to the public? Sometimes, as I mentioned, someone might call me and they might say, I want to know about AB 1482. They might live in Albany, but I don't consider that a rent review case because they're not calling me about the rent review case. They're calling me specifically about AB 1482. And so yes, the services we provide is a full range, everything you can think about in terms of tenant-landlord dynamics, conflicts, or resolution. But I think if Albany, or at least in my opinion, is really to look at AB 1482 and then say, how can we make it much better? Because AB 1482 has a lot of limitations. It's only covering certain units. What about units where it's a single family residence that's privately owned? What do you do with those types of units? Or what if it's a duplex where it is owner occupied? There's exclusions to AB 1482. What the Albany rent review does, it just basically tells the public, if you get a rent increase more than 5%, you're entitled to a rent review, but the rent review is not binding, meaning that the landlord and the tenant can go through conciliation, can go through mediation, but the landlord can still say, I'm not agreeing to any of those terms. I'm still sticking with my rent increase. I went through the process that I needed to through the city, and I'm dissolving myself from it from there on. So that is a limitation with the Albany rent review.
Thank you. That was exactly the question I was asking.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions, and then we'll go to public comment, and then we'll come back for follow-up discussion. So other questions before we go to public comment? All right. So Jonathan Torres, I really appreciate your being here and your answers to those questions. We'll now take public comment. We're on item 5-1, the rent review program, and taking public comment on that. If you have wish to be seen, raise your hand, and City Clerk, if you can move in. I see right now one person who has asked to be recognized.
Hi, good evening. This is Jeremiah here. I just have a couple questions, point of interest, I guess you could call it. What about, senior citizens? I mean, is there a focus on outreach for, let's say, a senior citizen being evicted? Okay, so now what? They're supposed to go be homeless? So now you have a homeless senior citizen. So is there housing, resources after eviction? Or let's say, what about rent review for a family with children in the school system? So now what happens with these kids, right? So I just want you guys to keep in mind, please, senior citizens and also disabled individuals and families, and also children. Just be considerate that the majority of the population isn't just your working class, 2 arms, 2 legs, healthy individual, jogs down the BART tracks every day and nothing's wrong with them. There's a lot of members of the community to consider. So please keep that in mind for everybody who might not be able to speak on these meetings because either their voice doesn't work or they might have a disability. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment, Jeremiah. And I see one other hand up, Senior Matson. I'd ask other people who wish to be recognized to raise your hand during this comment so that I can see that you're ready. So City Clerk is bringing in Senior Matson, and you're live.
Hi, this is just a question. Can I access your agenda somehow so I can see the order that other items will be coming up?
Yes, so the agenda is on the city website. I'm trying to think, it depends what you're clicking from, and it includes hyperlinks for the presentations and the minutes. I wonder, Sid, if you have the best suggestion. The one that I have has a relatively long link of a place that would be easy for people.
Well, I just, how many more items before the Gill Tract?
So we're on item 5.1, then we move into 6, and the Gill Tract is 6-4. So there are a number of other items before we get to that, including discussion of equity statement and equity impact plan.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I see a hand up from Peter Campbell. If the clerk can usher Peter Campbell in. And it looks like, and you're on.
All right, thank you very much. Couple of things. One, is this financial statement available, and have not been able to do so yet. That's one point. Secondly, I'm curious how many large rent increases have occurred in the past year, and how many vacancies are there in Albany at the present time. It seems to me that rents, particularly in this day of the COVID, rents are, if anything, declining. And I suspect that most, if not all, property owners are very afraid of raising rents at this time because tenants are valuable. Tenants are the income that the owners of the property depend on for their livelihood. And if they don't have the tenants, if they scare them away with a large rent increase that the tenant can't pay for, they're going to be out a lot of money. I just question how necessary this particular program is. As a member and president of the Albany Property Rights Advocates, we've been questioning for ever since the discussion of this program first came up about, is this really the way to go? With a budget or an expense of $100,000 a year, think how many people you could assist with their rent payments if there is truly a need for a rental assistance. That $100,000 would go a long way to helping a lot of people who are really in need. As it is, the property owners are apparently paying $100,000 in their fees every year to support this program, which is not being used by anybody, apparently. I'm appalled that there have only been, I'm not sure if it was 6 or 7 encounters with Echo Housing. I couldn't tell from the numbers. There were 4 conciliation, I think, requests, and 2. There were 4 numbers of 4 and 2 were pushed out there, and then the total was 7. I don't know where the 7th one was. But just seems like the activity level here and the use of this program is abysmal for the amount of money it's costing the property owners and the city. So those are my comments. I hope that you and the city council can review this and see if it really is necessary. And if it is necessary, fine. If it's not necessary, let's use that money for something that is useful to the community. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. At this time, I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move back to commissioner discussion. So who would like to, who's got follow-up discussion on this topic? Commissioner Gary.
Yes, as I'm listening to what this program involves, I think, I know we probably won't have time because we have one more meeting in December, but I think that we really need to reevaluate the direction of this program and the validity of the program. There again, marketing, a lot of renters don't know. I mean, just think about during COVID, how many people left our city because they felt like, I can't pay my rent, I have no other options, so I'm gonna leave. Had they had known about this program and the resources, and I'm not saying that's everyone, right? But how are we reaching out to the community to let them know that this is available? I think as soon as COVID hit, when the governor was giving moratoriums, we should have been out basically advising renters, property owners, here are your options, let's talk. We want you to stay here in our community. What can we do to help? So I think that we need to reevaluate this program and really find out, you know, is it useful? Like the last speaker spoke, we're spending that much money. We could be using that for grants to help people, low income people that have lost their jobs. Possibly some of that money could have went towards helping them pay their rent, right? Helping the property owner, you know, on offset of the income that they may have lost. So I would like to charge, hopefully you all agree that this program needs to be reevaluated and determine what's the best course of action for us to either continue it or to let it go. That's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Gary. Other commissioner discussion? Commissioner Kerr.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and do a little bit of arithmetic here. $100,000 is not that much money. While it is contended that that's money ill spent, I think of the people who are spending $3,000 a month for rent in the city of Albany, and I think of the city of Albany as being over 50% renter occupied and non-homeowners. And I wonder if we're not sort of missing the point on this. I do think that we need some sort of rent review. I think we need possibly a more stringent ordinance than rent review. I think we could look toward some sort of rent control. It's not forthcoming from the state, and I just wonder if we're missing the greater good here. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Grossman.
Let me hop on that by saying that I think Jonathan made a good point in mentioning the various kinds of housing that are not covered by 1482. We have a lot of single-family home rentals in Albany, and they're not eligible, and I am disappointed with the numbers. I'm very disappointed with the numbers. And I'm concerned that we haven't really done a good job of educating people. When someone rents an apartment in Albany, they want to get some information. I know that there's a statement that they get, but I don't think it's adequate in terms of what the process is. And these educational sessions, I think, need to happen. I'm not sure that we have enough to look at here yet. But I do certainly support Janelle, your concern, because while it's not a fortune, it's money that could be used in some other way. We have to find out if this program is really going to work, and in order to do that, we have to do a better job, I think, of educating people about it, and we need to really address some of the kinds of housing that are particularly vulnerable. And we know that there are lots of people who are having trouble. Right now, also, we're in the midst of COVID. And so, that doesn't give you a very good read because there are a lot of people who aren't paying rent because of the moratorium. So those people may not be looking for protection at this point. So, you know, I think it's a question that needs to be addressed. But there's some things that need to happen first.
If I may just say something about the cost of the program, you'll see that you know, a lot of the costs were upfront when staff worked, you know, diligently over 6 months before to get the ordinance and the program ready. So in year one, the staff cost was more than it is in year two. So you'll see that the cost breakdown for the first fiscal year is greater than the second fiscal year. And the other thing I want to say is that, you know, November 2nd is, the program started 2 years ago on November 2nd. So it's a very new program, and I think it needs, you know, more time to figure out whether or not it is working. And again, with COVID and the end of moratoriums, you know, this program will probably be much more needed in the upcoming months. We'll see a lot more activity in the next year or so.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and thank you all for your comments, and thank you, Mr. Torres, for your presentation. I think we're hearing a lot of things that are worth us keeping on the agenda. I appreciate the clarity on what the annual cost is. I see for last fiscal year, it's listed at something like $29,000 or $30,000, and that the $100,000 represents the aggregate. B, you know, the question of how to communicate and to make sure that we're finding ways to get the word out in this time period, which a number of commissioners mentioned, is something that's obviously of great importance. And we certainly recognize the loss of some of the in-person opportunities. And while recognizing the challenge of trying to replace that, at least of trying to be creative about it. And then C, you know, the difficulty of ascertaining, you know, the precise impact of it, not only because of the questions of how to understand, you know, the impact of what happens for ones that stay at the city staff and the excellent advising people receive there versus the impact of the ones that reach the ECHO service, but also the extreme difficulty of trying to figure out what impact the existence of it has upon in deferring or minimizing potential challenges or problems. So one thing we can't really measure is how things would work if this program weren't in existence, which obviously would be something in an ideal world we would like to know to really ascertain exactly the impact that it has. And then D, the important point that Isabel just made of a relatively recent program, and also one where a chunk of its life is in this extremely unusual and fraught time. So I think I'm hearing lots of engagement with it and a desire to continue to revisit in light of those factors, as well as ongoing, you know, state, current and potential future legislation. And I hope on all of our parts that we can figure out, you know, how to judge what's working, and as we figure out pieces that we think are not working as well, how to make recommendations, you know, to improve it. I see Commissioner Marks.
I would just like to say, I don't want us to pull the rug out from under people in Albany like right now. So I think talking about ending this program is really a big mistake. That's just my 2 cents on this. I think we need to continue it and make it better.
Commissioner Gary.
And just want to be clear, my statement was not more of ending the program, but I mean, do we have an emergency fund? I mean, the numbers are going up in COVID. There may be people losing their jobs. The landlords or property owners are missing income. And again, you know, we have to be able to, if we're going to utilize this program, it has to be able to work for both parties involved, because otherwise, I mean, they're going to lose tenants, right? And then our homeless population will increase. So, you know, if we can make it better, or even maybe put it on our next agenda to talk more on how we could, I'm for it. But that's something that we need to address. And I think with the numbers rising in COVID, we need to address that immediately.
Thank you. All right, so I appreciate all of that, and we're very gratified the time that you spent in helping educate us about it, Mr. Torres, and your always informative presentations, and we appreciate all of Sid's hands-on work in keeping this this going and in being the key point of interface for city residents. So thank you so much, and not seeing others, we will conclude this agenda item. I do see a hand up now, but we have concluded the public part of 5-1. We'll have public comment on each of the others, but again, ask if the public wishes to be heard to with their hand up during the section of each item where we do take public comment. So this is a update and presentation, not an action item. So we will move on to group item 6, which is discussion and possible action on matters related to the following items. There are 4 different agenda items here. The first is 6-1, and that's where we'll begin. This is equity statement. Our consultant, Nicole Anderson and Associates, will continue discussion from prior meetings on the identification of elements of an equity statement. Again, this builds upon work that came from a charge from council for the Social and Economic Justice Commission to prepare a equity action plan for the council to take under advisement in the in the next year. And so we continue to work on subcommittees, as we'll talk about in the next item, but this item focuses on Ms. Anderson's efforts to help us frame the overall idea of a statement that'll shape the rest of the work. So I see you here, Nicole, and welcome. And we will, so our process on this is that we'll hear from Nicole, we'll hear questions and first round of engagement from members of the commission, then we'll go to public comment, and then we'll come back for follow-up action and potentially any action after that. So welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Good to see you all. It just feels like it's been a while, but just want to thank you all for your hard work and staying engaged in this process in the midst of lots that is going on around us. I just want to acknowledge your work and your dedication, and just appreciate locking arms with you during this racial equity journey that we're all on, not just in Albany, even in my city, in Vallejo, and all over the nation and world. I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for staying engaged on the things that are most important, I think, in the city. So thank you for that. I am going to be fairly brief with you tonight, and Dr. Holt, I know, is somewhere on the line. I know she's there. And so what we're going to do is, for this agenda item, we're going to try to make it a little easier for you because you have multiple agenda items. So we're going to address the racial equity statement, kind of give you some feedback because we know that you've been working through that, but also want to give a little bit of front loading because your other agenda items are around your subcommittee work, and you're going to talk about your survey as well. So we're trying to hit both of those to try to speed it along since it's getting pretty late. So what I wanted to do is these slides here are also located in that Google folder that we share. So we want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to constantly go back to any resources we share with you. So just, this particular slide just reminds us about staying fully engaged in this work around change. And so again, reminding us that, we want to change, we want change around us, but we have to continue to look inwardly at that second question of who wants to change. So we're going to continue as consultants to push you as a city, as the SEJC commission, to look at what do we need to do to make sure we are part of this change. And it's not just about the system needs to change, they need to change, but we are part of the change. And that's going to be really important in this work. And that last piece, who wants to lead the change, this is where we're still working at. How do we keep this work moving forward and keep our hand up for all 3 of these questions? Because this work is going to get harder and harder. And we're just excited to support you on the journey, but know that this work, again, is difficult to create change when we're talking about historical inequities. I want to remind you of your 4 agreements that we've shared from the very beginning. Again, thanking you for remembering these 4 agreements, but reminding you, more importantly, that it has to be a safe space to engage in this work in the city. So we want to remind you, as we're developing this racial equity statement, Is it possible? There's a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure, and I know I'm not able to. Possible the back end. We just have a little bit of feedback. Thank you. So I want to remind you all that as we talk about developing this racial equity statement, that you honor the fact that safe space has to be established to move this work forward. And some of us, I know in SEJC, are absolutely like social justice warriors. We want to move this work pretty fast. And there's people in the community that feel the same way. We want to remind you that this work is a go slow to go fast process because there are people who still don't feel safe and engaged in this work. So we want to remember, if anyone is feeling attacked or anyone is feeling judged and don't feel they have a space in this journey, that we're going to have to meet people where they are. That's what great equity leaders do. So I want to remind the charge of SEJC as a commission, and as new people come onto this commission, our roles as equity leaders is to meet people where they are and move this work forward. And so that's really important. Safe space has to be established. But I want to remind us, especially in the community, that safety and comfort are two different things. So this work will be uncomfortable. And so everyone who's going to engage in this work, whether the city staff, whether it's the community at large, whoever is engaged in this work, we know it's going to be uncomfortable. That's the way we move work forward. So these 4 agreements, I want to remind us of these. It's very important we not skip this step. To stay engaged, know that we have to experience discomfort, know that everyone's perspective, speaking our truth, is really important. But most importantly, accept and expect non-closure. This is a long journey ahead. There's a lot of work that we're going to have to undo in terms of hundreds of years of racial inequality, inequity, not only in the city of Albany, but really around our nation and also around the world. This is historical, so it's going to take us some time. With that being said, what I want to do is just remind us about the work you're doing as SEJC. As you recall, we gave you the water system change article, and it's important that you go back to that article, remember the framework that we try to walk you through in terms of addressing and identifying what are the racial equity needs in Albany, and then how are we going to address those. I want to remind you of that article. Is a great resource for you. The community, if they want to be engaged in it, the water system change, you can look it up. It's easy to find. But I want to remind us about the process we're taking you through with looking at system change so this will last. We want this to go beyond this commission, right? In terms of this year, this term, we want this work to last. And we talked about 10 years and beyond. So this analogy, that fish story, is going to be the constant work we're trying to do as us as fish swimming along in this system. We got to remember that we're still figuring out what water is. And many of us are still not understanding what the conditions are existing in Albany. So some are going to go slower than others because ultimately what's water? Racism is in the water, right? Inequities are in the water, and some don't recognize that water yet. So we have to be really mindful that a lot of the work you're doing is still being more educated about what actually are the racial inequities in Albany. So I want to remind you the approach again I'm going to take you through and remind you of is think about system change. So it's not only changing policy and practice, but it's also about shifting resources. And we just talked, I heard you talk about rent review and really how do you support in that space of looking at resources of people who need it the most. But also we're going to have to talk about the relationships, who those stakeholders are who have the least amount of power in Albany, and also talk about how do we shift mindsets to do this work, which is a heavy lift. So systems approach is what I want SEJC to really remember as our recommendations to you as consultants. So what does all this mean? So I'm going to go through this really quickly and just give you a little feedback because we got a chance to look at some of the work that you've done since our last conversation. You've met together as subcommittees. So we want to give you a little bit of an update on where we're going. The city council, based on our time frame, is going to look for an update on where you at in your racial equity impact plan. So we are in the midst of preparing your interim report to give to you as SEJC, so you can take a look at it on December the 1st and have an opportunity to flesh that out and see where do we want to make adjustments. This is the body of all of our work we've done since we've worked together since July. And our goal is to have all that finalized for your next meeting on December 1st. So we were looking at the calendar, and after looking at your subcommittee work, all the things we've done, we want to give you, after tonight's feedback, we want to give you another week to just look at, is there anything that we're missing, anything you want to add so that we can create your draft interim report, give that to you on December 1st. Okay, so we're looking at a week from today is November 11th. So that's where that date came from. And what we specifically are going to give you feedback on tonight is your racial equity statements, because you all have been working on that. And then also your community survey questions, which you've been working on as well. And so again, the Google folder that you have, remember you have those resources, okay? So we wanna make sure you remember as you're working together, you have those resources to give you a little feedback, okay? And so I'll give you a little sense of what this looks like, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. So a couple things. We talked about what does racial equity mean in Albany. So if you all remember last month, we had an opportunity to wrestle through like, what does equity mean to you? Commissioner Grossman, right? What does equity mean to you, Chair Downs? And we went through that whole process we call the elephant and blind man process, right? And you all were kind of like, what is racial equity means this? And we took those words and we created a statement just for fun, right? Just to get us started and noticing that we all have different perspectives. So as you all are evolving this work, we have to ensure that in Albany, we have a real common language around what does racial equity mean, knowing that different perspectives are going to come to the table and that we're going to have to all figure out how do we communicate and break this down so that racial equity is a common language. We understand what it means when it's said, and that people recognize here's where we're going. Okay, the image on the left is a reminder of what you've seen before, okay, that equity and equality, racial equality are not the same thing. So that's something we're going to keep unpacking, okay, and hopefully get to the point of interrupting that reality piece that we see in that slide there, but also getting to a place where eventually, maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, we don't even have to have this conversation anymore. How about liberation, where we remove all these barriers, these racial equity barriers? So that's the ultimate goal in this work. Okay, so what did you all do the last time we were together? So you all had racial equity statements that you all have worked through. We looked in your report, your subcommittee reports, and so we're going to give you a little feedback. But there's a couple things we want you to think about and consider as we get ready to give you some feedback on your statement. So a couple things. To what extent do your racial equity statements actually address the 6 systemic conditions? So in that whole water system change, those 6 levels in a system that we've walked you through, and we talked about how did you identify those equity challenges. We did this with your subcommittee work. And those 6 levels, we asked you those questions. So how does your racial equity statement actually address those 6 systemic conditions? Okay, so something to think about. How can you provide an example of what racial equity looks like in action? So as you create this statement, can you show us like what that looks like? Okay, and that may be hard to see at this point. It's like, this is why we're doing the work, Nicole, so maybe we don't have a good example. But this is something to think about, okay? How can your racial equity statement be measured? So if racial equity happens in Albany, how do we know it's happened? Okay, and that's going to be something that's really important. What are those metrics? What is the data that's going to tell us that that has actually happened? Okay, so these are things to think about as you're creating and finalizing your statement. In what ways can you gather diverse perspectives to finalize your racial equity statement? Okay, and so this is where we want to think about how do we pull multiple voices besides SEJC within our community to ensure we have a real great perspective about what racial equity means in Albany. Okay, so there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. Okay, and then last question, how does your racial equity statement driving the questions for your development of your survey? So you all have been working on those survey questions, right? And so what we're going to do is as you start to really hone those in, we want to ask you, how is your statement really driving those questions? So that when you ask questions in your survey, you get a response that drives you into, is racial equity actually happening here in Albany? What is this perspective of all of our stakeholders with racial equity? Okay, so these are things to consider as you look at your statements. And I'm going to put those statements on the screen just in case we've forgotten what they were. And again, just for you in the community to understand, these are drafts. These are just a working document. There is nothing final. SEJC is just working to develop a draft of what racial equity means. And then this will follow up with asking the community to give input on this through multiple measures, like so the community listening sessions, having a survey. So obviously this is just the beginning of that work. So I want to remind the community this is not a final statement. So giving you a sample, if you all remember when we met last month, we gave you an example of what racial equity statement might look like. Okay, so this is one we just gave as an example. Okay, so I just want you to look at that one. This is just an example. Just to get our brain thinking about where are we going with racial equity? Okay. And the key is calling out race. Okay, so I want to push us to keep thinking about how are we calling out race in itself? Okay, because we know there's some intersectionalities, right? Like there are people who could be of a certain ethnic background, but they may be a certain gender, they may be a certain sexual orientation. So we know there's intersectionality, but the key component of this is race, because that's where we see predictability of people being served differently in a community. So here's an example from October 6th, where we all were together, and it was late night, if y'all remember. And so here's an example of when we took all of your words, put them together, and came up with just a draft statement. Okay, so I want you to take a look at what you talked about at that time. Okay. We underlined a few words that kind of stuck out. So when we think about those words, holding accountable, right? Justice and peace. These were things that came up, and our questions are, what does that look like, right? To hold someone accountable, hold a system accountable. Okay, what does that look like? Are we referring to power structures? Justice and peace. What does that look like? What is an example of that, right? So these are the things to think about when we're calling out racial equity. So this was just a draft, and you had some public comment that came in and actually talked about, hey, maybe anti-discrimination, human, transparency, distribution of power. We should consider those things in this statement. Okay, so these are things to consider as we start to get feedback. But again, how do we take a statement like this and continue to work through it? So I'm going to share with you your statements that you all started to work out on your subcommittees. We have a few we pulled out. So the housing one, right? Housing and community development. So this was the statement that's been drafted through subcommittee conversations through housing and community development. Just take a peek at some of the words that stick out. What we appreciate is that you called out how it would be measured. So that was one of those key questions. Can we measure racial equity? Or is it just like a dream, a pie in the sky, but we really don't know how to measure that it's happened, right? So calling out that metrics is important. I appreciate that. For policing, we have a segment of it. You all had a pretty long definition, so we took a segment of it for tonight. I want you to take a look at what you see as public safety, equity in particular, policing and public safety. So take a peek. Again, we appreciate that collaboration, calling out how to measure the impact of this work through collaboration with the community as well as with leadership. Okay, so again, notice what's happening. The whole elephant blind man process is happening, right? We're wrestling with what is racial equity in Albany. We have different ways of seeing it: housing, policing, community development. We're starting to see these. I know Margie and Bart, we had the pleasure of working with you as we're seeing that equity definition even evolve through the lens of students, right? So we're getting to that place. And so really excited about adding that voice to your racial equity statement as a commission. So we're really looking forward to that development as well. And so as you think about this process, what I want to close with is this. You all are moving to a place of not only solidifying your racial equity statement, but also you're moving to a place of developing survey questions, which is another part of your report that we know you're going to share in the next agenda item. So we just want to make sure you make the connection that as you're developing those questions and evolving those and finalizing those, that you tie them to your racial equity statement. So are your questions asking for the perspective of the community about what racial equity is? Are they asking questions based on these system change pieces? So in your questions, are they asking about policies? Are they asking about practices? Are they asking about resources with a racial equity lens? Not just demographics, because we want to get a sense of who's taking the survey, but we want to make sure our questions actually gather the information we need to then create action steps that are going to address every one of these 6 levels in the system. Okay, so I hope you see where we're going with that. Okay, so that's the racial equity piece that I want to make sure we have some feedback on. And of course, in our next steps, I'd mentioned, we always show this slide too, just some of the deliverables, some of the timelines. So I just want to pull out and make sure we get a chance to hear your thoughts on, after getting some feedback on your statements, if there's additional feedback you'd like to ask, even questions to us, but we're looking at another week to see, just make sure there's anything you're missing that you want to add to your survey questions, you want to add to your statement before Dr. Holt and I take that information, put it all together in your interim report and give it back to you on December 4th. And this is a collection of all the work you've been doing since July. Okay, so we're going to pause for a second, chair downs. I want to just kind of pass the virtual mic over and see if there's a discussion or question that we may want to ask based on where the commission has about the racial equity statement. And of course, I know the surveys are part of your next report, but I wanted to make sure we give you a little connection to the racial equity statement, and the surveys really do connect.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Anderson. We appreciate this. And so again, for the public, we're discussing item 6-1, and there are a couple of interlinked items, but this is the equity statement, which is part of an overall equity impact plan that we'll be working on, and that the next SEJC will be working on, and that our discussion now is focused on the idea of a statement or a group of statements that we might include to help focus both our thinking and the shaping of the plan. So we'll take questions and preliminary discussion from the commissioners at this point. Then at that point, we'll take we'll move to public comment, and we'll take public comment. And then after that public comment, then we'll come back to the commissioners for any follow-up discussion as well as any action that might be there. So first rounds of questions or first rounds of discussions. Bart.
One of the things I felt after we worked on this last time is that for the 5 of us to develop an equity statement that represents the city of Albany is a little presumptuous. I mean, who do we really represent? And so we might have some elements, but I think ultimately the identification of an equity statement has to be part of the survey process in some way. Also, you've presented in the past several equity statements that have been developed by people who've thought about this a lot longer and a lot harder than we have. And it would be useful, I think, for us to look at those in terms of what are the common elements. You know, what are the common elements that these statements hit upon that seem to be part of what people in general mean by equity, so that we produce an equity statement which really is broadly representative and not just the work of the 5 of us here.
Thank you, Bart. So 2 important points there about when in the process we want to actually feel like we're defining it, whether it's in the early or if it's after the results of a survey, which we'll be talking about in a later item. And also about making sure we're drawing from common themes, whether what we want to have is a kind of principles of what we imagine will be in it that then we reflect upon after the survey results come in, as opposed to us trying to hammer out or wordsmith a answer before hearing from the survey.
Right. Do you want me to respond to that or go to the next commissioner?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. So no, what a great point. And I think that's the purpose of the SEJC and the subcommittee work, is not to define it for the community, but to define it with them. But one of the things that's important is that SEJC recognized there has to be a starting point, right? And so the starting point, and it goes back to the elephant and blind man process, right? You're starting that process of, hey, let's explore what does racial equity mean, but there's a lot of unknowns, and it goes back to that, what's water, right? So that feeling you have, Bart, of like, hey, we still have elements we still need to understand. Some of those elements are not elements the consultants can give you. Those elements are your community, right? So you're spot on. Your survey is needed, right? I've heard several times from public comment, as well as I think Commissioner Gary, Vice Chair Gary, mentioning about outreach to the community. And making sure that those voices are heard. And I think that's the piece of the work that has to happen, is how do we define racial equity? Yes, we don't want to do that for the community, because then we'd be doing a disservice. But at the end of the day, your work and your charge as a commission was to tackle this. So you have to start with you. And so part of that work is around how are you based on the research and the focus areas. So you remember when Dr. Holt and I started to work with you, you had focus areas you'd already identified, right? But there's still a lot of data that still would need to be collected. And that survey was a big part of that, but also recognizing there's some more data that the staff would be able to provide, which is still a process where the staff is still working through identifying what does racial equity mean even to us. So there's that work that has to happen collectively to get to a starting point, and then you start to build and put what I call the meat on the bones, right? And so that's a process that's going to take time, and also recognizing the readiness, right? The readiness to talk about racial equity, because that's still a process that the community is still wrestling with. And so I think what you're asking, Bart, is really powerful, and that is part of the process of building those elements to get to that place. We're still in that kind of first phase of work of just understanding what racial equity is and hearing the community even talk about that. And so there's that piece that goes slow to go fast process you're probably feeling, but we're still in that beginning phases. So what we're asking you is we need as consultants for you to have a starting point. SEJC has to have, what does racial equity mean to you? Because you are the body that was charged to give city council a recommendation. So we got to start with you. But you're absolutely right. We got to outreach to the community. And we started that process with the listening sessions. You're going to have to continue with those. You're going to have to continue with surveying. You're going to have to continue with outreach. But that is part of the process. So I hope that helps a little bit with regards to kind of where we're going, but knowing that there's still a lot of work to be done. But we got to start with you. And your voices are important because you do represent the community, but you don't represent all voices, right? So there is a need to hear more voices. And that's something we have to talk about is how are we outreaching to hear more voices? What are those ideas around getting those voices to be heard? So I hope that helped a little bit around that question, because I hear you and it makes a lot of sense. I think it's just part of that process. So I hope that helped a little bit around how to build that statement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or preliminary discussion before we go to public comment? Commissioner Kerr.
Yeah, I want to thank Bart and thank Nicole for their comments on this topic, and just want to reflect on the fact that less than 2 years ago there was some question about sunsetting the Social and Economic Justice Commission within the city of Albany, and here we are today, and here we are with this new charge of infusing the conversation that we have with racial equity. We need to do this, and we need to not go backwards on any of what we've accomplished thus far. So I think that coming up with a statement about social equity within this and racial equity within the city of Albany is the core of the mission of this commission. And we need to pay attention closely to what we create, because that is what we need to go forward with. We don't need to be sunsetted. We don't need to be gaslighted. We don't need to be dismissed as not important in the conversation of the community. We are important, and the discussions that we have here are important. So what Bart has said, what Margie has said, what everyone on the commission has said is crucial, and we need to hold that as our core mission.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? All right, seeing none, now we'll take public comment. Again, that we are on item 6-1, which is the equity statement. We're taking public comment specific to this item. We'll have public comment on other of the items under 6, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4 as they come up. If you'd like to be recognized, please raise your hand. And please raise your hand. Don't wait until people finish because once we move on from public comment, then we don't come back until the next agenda item. So if you'd like to be heard, please raise your hand. I see at least 3 hands up. If Jeremiah, you're in.
I just want to say racial equality, it's basically like in school, no bullying. So we just need to uphold that as adults, because we ask that in our schools for our children. You know, we tell them, you know, no bullying, you know, no making fun of kids because they can't run as fast as you, or don't make fun of a kid on the playground because they spilt their soda on their shirt. You know, we ask all these responsibilities of kids, you know, no bullying. We make all these rules. But as parents, you know, they look up to us. You know, we got to lead by example. We're the adults. And here we are, you know, people still bully one another as grown adults, you know, just because we look different. You know, I think everybody just needs to grow up. And, you know, we have this slogan in Albany is we stand united against hate, right? Albany stands united against hate. You know, why don't we bring that back? Or because we do stand united against hate. And so we just really need to lead by example and really need to follow through with our words. And so, yeah, so if we could just do that as adults in our community and set a good example for our kids and stop the bullying and stop the hate and just all get together and get along and realize we're just humanity and we're one community. You know, it's an injury to one is an injury to all in a way. So yeah, I hope we could all just, why can't we all just get along, right?
Thank you, Jeremiah. I think the clerk is waving in now. Our next speaker. Again, if you'd like to be heard on this topic, please go ahead and raise your hand. And I think the clerk is waving in Signe Matson, and you are on.
Thank you. I notice in the draft statements how it would be, the accountability would be reports twice a year. I'm wondering, in the growth and process of achieving racial equity, what's going to be your complaint process so that people who are experiencing the inequity have a way to go forward to let it be known? And how will there be an accountability process for those who are doing the harming to people? Some of us at the Gill Tract have been learning about transformative justice and trying to learn how to take accountability for our own actions, and how when people do that, they can have support people around them. So the people that have been harmed have support people, and the people who have done the harm also have support people that can help them be accountable. So if we have problems with officers in the police department, assuming that you actually have a realistic training to begin with, but then when harms have happened and people speak up about them, will you have a process built in so that people will be held accountable and be supported in being accountable? Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. The clerk is moving in. We have two more people with hands up, and the clerk is moving in. Corey Dosty, and you're on.
Good evening. I'm tuning in a bit late, but I was able to see the different statements. The ones that were SEJC specific, I didn't see race really pulled out in those, even though, right, the consultant mentioned how important that was and that y'all had sort of agreed that it was. So that was the main thing I wanted to comment on. And then just in response to the Gill Tract commenter just now, Transformative justice is about interpersonal relationships, and it doesn't really scale up to systems, especially not state systems of policing. It's a fairly abolitionist politic. Transformative justice is about how we take care of us, and we have to be in consensual, ongoing, committed, accountable relationship to each other. And that isn't true when people are invested with huge degrees of power. That accountability process gets really warped. So I don't think that that can work for the police in the way that transformative justice currently is. Having accountability pods for people is great. I don't think the current training for police, right? But it's a whole thing. Anyway, transformative justice, good. Keep doing your work. Hi. Glad to be able to tune in again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Corey. I see two more hands up. Julie Winkelstein, I think you're being waved in. And let's see, you're not quite yet. There you are. Welcome, Julie. Or actually, there you are.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying that I appreciate Bart's comments about involving the community, and I understand that it's, as Nicole pointed out, it starts with SEJC, but I hope that this will involve the community in a much better way than has happened in the past. With all of the projects that Albany had, I remember there was when the police were putting together their strategic plan, they were having meetings and letting the community come in and talk to each other and police officers. And I went to some of those, and they were predominantly police officers because the community didn't know about it. So again, going back to that initial idea of making sure the community knows, and I know that Commissioner Gary, whatever, I know you have another title, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, I hope that Janelle, I agree with her about what she said also. And I had some questions about, I guess my question is, and it was probably discussed at the last one, but I'm not really clear on why. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a racial equity statement, but I'm not clear on what exactly is trying to be accomplished by this statement. And how can the community members inform us by letting them know, letting SEJC and the city know what they would like from this, and maybe that will be different from what, say, city council wants from it, or what city staff wants from it, or what SEJC wants from it. And I think it's really important to be really clear on what it's supposed to accomplish and what it can't accomplish. And then accountability, I totally agree with Signe, I think that's the name, about accountability. How will people in the city know that there's actually going to be accountability? It's one thing to be told that you should report something or that there's going to be a report, but what if nothing happens? How do you know something will happen? How are you going to make sure that something will happen? Because in a way, it's almost worse if you set it up so you say to people, "This is safe. This is good. This is what we want. What you want we want you to come forward," and then nothing happens. It's devastating to be told that something's going to happen and then it doesn't. So I guess, yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I have like a list of things I want to cover. I think that's it. Anyway, I appreciate that this is happening. I'm very, very concerned about the results and the accountability and the involvement of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. And the clerk will wave in. There's one hand up at this point. And that is Cheryl Sudduth. And the clerk is, and you're on. Oh, no. You were here and now not. So let's, here we go. You're being waved in and you're on. Thank you.
Thank you. This is always an interesting one for me because I'm gonna, and thank you, Miss Nicole, for being here. But I'm gonna agree with one of the commissioners. I do find it difficult to listen to someone tell those of us in this community who have had to suffer from these inequities. Something that I learned a long time ago. There's a proverb that says, only he that has traveled the road knows where the holes are deep. Only he that has traveled the road knows where the holes are deep. So the law is really simple. Every experience is repeated or suffered till you experience it properly and fully the first time. And that is being Okri. And it basically is when you're dealing with racial equity, and you know that it's about applying justice and a little bit of common sense to a system that we all know is totally out of balance. You can't push the river. You can't push water upstream. You can't push it. You have to let the water flow by itself. And you can't force a person to show you respect, but you can damn well refuse to be disrespected. When I looked at these statements, as the young woman said a few minutes ago, I do not see a focus on what this racial equity statement is supposed to be about. You can't mask it in these soft words. You can't mask it in this intersectionality with everything else. If you're going to focus on racial equity, focus on racial equity. If you're going to focus on social equity, then you focus on social equity. But if this is supposed to be about racial equity, then you make it about racial equity. Otherwise, don't play with the community. This is a community that is hurting from acts of civil and human disrespect. As I told you when you started this, my daughter and her friends were people who were severely hurt, and never, ever has this community come to bear with those acts of racial disrespect at that high school. So don't play as if, don't play with the words. Don't just say it. Don't make it a hashtag. Don't pretend. Either you go 100 in dealing with the racial issues that Albany has, or you don't do it at all. I think that you make it worse. You will make it worse if you pretend, or we go at this with this sideways type of thing. But let's not use it as these kumbaya moments. Let's not use these let's not abuse these moments. We have an opportunity to do it right. Ms. Judy is correct. Let's go full force and be brave and be courageous and face it and have the uncomfortable conversations and ask the questions that we know we need to ask. Otherwise, don't do it at all, because you will cause more harm than good.
Right.
And I leave you with that tonight. Please don't do that. I'm going to end, but please don't do that. Let me just say this last thing. Every one of us must suffer one of two pains. We will suffer the pain of discipline, or we will suffer the pain of regret. And I ask you, do not regret letting this moment pass us.
Thank you so much and thank you to all the members of the public. We will come back to the commissioners. Commissioners will continue discussing and then decide whether to take action on this item in this meeting. And then we'll move on to the next agenda item. So other commissioners, other thoughts on the equity action statement? Commissioner Gary.
Can we bring that statement up so we can have it visual and ready? And I just want to make one comment. When the public is speaking, and this is just me, I would like them to finish their statement. I know they have 3 minutes, and I would like them to complete their thought, because we need to hear everything. And being on this commission and listening to city council meetings, Jeremiah has talked, and we have allowed him to talk, and we don't cut him off. And so to me, when a Black woman, an African-American woman is speaking, whether it's her or Asian community or whoever, we need to let them finish their statement and not be so quick to rush them off. So we need to hear from the community so we can learn and get a clear understanding on what we need to do. So that's all I have to say.
Vice Chair Gary, you mentioned you want to see it visual. I shared a couple of versions. You want to go back to the one you all wrestled with in
Yes,
October?
that's
Okay.
the one.
All right. Because I shared a few that you all worked with in your subcommittees, but also this was one that you kind of started a conversation about. So let me pull that up. That bottom part's getting cut off. Is that the one you're referring to that you all started the dialogue on?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have specific questions or?
No, I just wanted to read it and just wanted to have the chair just kind of figure out, if we all in agreement of the statement. Is there words that we need to rethink and probably implement to where the statement is directed to what we want to accomplish, or what, I'd just like to hear the commission's thoughts about it.
Would it help if I give you a little feedback on that to help maybe respond? Because I think this may help. And remember, I showed you several versions of this statement because you all are also working in your subcommittees. So would that help a little bit, Vice Chair?
That would.
Okay. So remember, the purpose of me showing you these is it kind of goes back to that elephant blind man process, right? We're still removing our blinders, our perspectives that may not be at the table yet. There's still more that we need to learn. So each of you are bringing your different perspectives. This was a collective one that we went through the activity just to get you all to discuss, what does racial equity mean? And so you notice, even with listening to public comment, hearing different perspectives, you're starting to think like, oh, maybe we need to make some adjustments. And so if you can imagine that statement, and then you had your housing statement, right, where you were more centered more on housing. And then you had a policing piece, you were more centered on policing. Education has theirs that they're working on, right? The reality is that the one thing I want you to hear is that I need you all to go back to your committee, subcommittee time in this next week. Now that you've heard some feedback from not only the community, but also as a consultant, there's some massaging we still need to do to have a starting point to now go to the community and say, give us feedback. And so one thing I want to just highlight that is missing in some of these statements, right? Even going back to the first one, because that's a lot stood out to folks, is remember, we're doing a racial equity statement. And I mentioned this earlier, that we have to call out race. And we have not done that to that extent, which speaks to, again, the readiness in our journey to do this work. The community, I believe, will help give some of that feedback. But it is something the commission needs to think about as we revisit this and come December 1st. We want to make sure that race is actually called out in what we believe racial equity looks like. So I want to push you all to think about that in your subcommittee time, is start thinking about, what does race actually mean? And if you recall, in October, we broke down the last couple of sessions, we broke down and did a little more education around what does race mean, right? Let's start talking about how do we unpack that, thinking about the constructs of race versus ethnicity and culture, and how just the construct of race in itself is a social construct, right? A mental construct, and it actually divides people more than it brings us together, as Jeremiah mentioned, like, why can't we come together? Well, the reality is that we have a structure in place in our society that separates folks. So that's part of the burden of SEJC when you were charged to talk about racial equity. And remember how this all started. This was really centered around social unrest, right, after the murder of Mr. George Floyd. So again, we remind you as consultants, the readiness in the city of Albany to address race, you're still on that journey. That's why we still mask it with other words. It's not an indictment on SEJC. It's more of, this is where Albany is in its journey. So can we get to a place to talk about what the impact has been for African-American people in the community? How do we unpack what African-American means versus someone who identifies as Black, versus someone who identifies as African, versus someone who identifies that I don't even want to be called any of those. I want you to identify me as this. That we haven't gotten to that place, but we have to start with SEJC and creating at least a conversation starter. You see where I'm going? And that's where I do appreciate what Bart said, is we don't want to define this for the community, but you got to start because you all were the body that was charged to do this work. So our starting point is where you are now. So I hope as you think about this and to go back for you all to have some conversation moving forward, is what Dr. Holt and I will do is we'll take all of your kind of statements and conversation and we'll share it with you in a document. So this week, what you can do is start to wrestle with, hey, here's all the things we came up with. Now let's actually start to think, what do we need to rethink? So that when you share that back with us, we can now take your statements and start to create language in your equity impact plan that's starting to move us in a place of here's what racial equity means to us in Albany. Again, just the starting point. Okay, this is not the final, this is the beginning. And we have a lot of work to do, just as you heard from the community feedback. So I hope that helps a little bit. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I think I appreciate it. I think one thing that would, and I can't see all of the commissioners while we're
I'll stop sharing for you.
Around. Thank you.
No problem.
I think one thing that, we can reflect upon in the interest of an awareness, as I've heard from multiple commissioners about wariness of the length of meetings, that I want to be, focused, and also to be conscious of your prior complaints about the lengths of meetings. So I think one thing that we should ask is, at this point, do we want to be responding to these ideas here and in this place, or do we want to be taking these back to the subcommittees in hopes that they make reports back to us in December? So I think that would be, the will of the commission is what we'll do. But that'd be one way for us to start to assess what's our best action at this point.
Do we need to make a motion, or what are you asking?
We would not need a motion to. What I'm asking is, I don't cut off a discussion without hearing from people. So I'm asking if we want to be moving something back to the subcommittees, which doesn't require a motion, or if we want to be discussing it as a group here. If people want to discuss it as then we can do that as long as commissioners want. And when we're ready to move it back to the subcommittees, it goes back there by default when we're at that point. Bart.
I think working in the subcommittees is going to be more productive. And I'm hoping that what we'll end up with is an overall statement and then an implementation of that in the three areas that we're working on. So that each area might begin with a statement about what does equity mean, for example, in relation to housing, based on a broader statement of equity, which, by the way, that broad statement of equity needs some work, because we wound up defining equity as equality. So I do think we can do more productive work in the small group right now.
Other commissioners' thoughts?
I would agree, Commissioner Grossman, that if we can work within our subcommittees to kind of go over language and verbiage on how to make this work, that would be great. And then we can bring it back in December.
All right. I think I saw a thumbs up from Commissioner Marks and Commissioner Kerr.
I would like to see us spend, and I would like us to end our meeting at 10:30, so I'll start with that. But I'd like to see us spend the next 10 minutes talking about the equity statement that we have and trying to hammer it out to a way that we can then take to the subcommittees and move forward with something of a consensus of what our equity statement is. So I'd like to propose that.
So other people with thoughts. I mean, certainly we can do that. I personally have grave doubts we'll end at 10:30, but I doubt it regardless of the 10 minutes that we would spend here. And I think we should make the decision on whether or not we think it'll be productive to do so in that respect, or to move it to subcommittees. I'm glad to keep talking about it, but it really depends on the will of the other commissioners.
I mean, if we're willing to stop at a hard 10 minutes, then we can kind of, work on it. So I would be in agreement with that, but we need to stop in 10 minutes.
All right. Did I see a thumbs up from you, Bart?
My timer is set.
So I have 9:33, and why don't we dive into it? And while I won't, I won't enforce a timeline on commissioners if they all decide they want to keep going. I will use that to remind us at 9:42 that we're approaching it. Judy, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, it would be helpful for me if Nicole could once again put that statement that I was not part of, and I apologize for that, but the 10-6 draft, racial equity in Albany, I'm very confused about the final phrase here. Then this will result in justice and peace. I think we could easily end the statement with a simple action, and it doesn't need to, then this will. I think we need to play around with that a little bit. Racial equity in Albany is when all community members, institutions, and systemic structures and practices are accountable and measured to treat each human with justice, justice, fairness, and equality, period. I think that's the statement that we're trying to strive for. I think we've overstepped by going that far with the statement.
I comment. I think I'm struggling with that word human. I mean, we're all human beings. Do we have to have that word in the statement? I mean, if we can, I mean, I don't know what terminology we can use, or just
we could say individual person, or there's
yeah. What about each person, right?
Yeah.
We have still, I support the idea of those changes. We still have the issue that Bart raised of equity and equality, of whether it's whether we're in a circle. If we say equity is defined as equality, or whether the way that equality is used in this part of the sentence implies some, helps us escape that circularity. And the other question is that we begin with, racial equity, but do we need, based on comments from before, to think about whether we need to call out race again in the second part of the sentence, or is it embedded in the structure of the sentence by being the subject of it? I think it's possible to view both questions, the equity equality question and the question of whether racial equity being the subject of the sentence runs through the second half of the sentence, or whether we need to also do a call out there. Those are two things I see. Bart.
Just one thought. I don't like is when. I think that's clumsy. And I think racial equity in Albany requires all community members, institutions, systematic structures, and practices to treat each person with justice and fairness. I think there needs to be more than one sentence to this definition. And we're trying to cram everything into one sentence, and it doesn't quite work for me. The idea that it requires that kind of behavior also signifies to me that that's not all that's needed. That's one thing that it requires. Equity requires providing resources to people who need those resources in order to lead a satisfactory life. So, equity is a little bit is a slightly different thing. It requires, I think, support for people. It requires services. It requires reparations. It requires a variety of things. So I think we need to say more than just that sentence.
Great. Other thoughts?
Bart, I wonder if we need requires at all. Racial equity in Albany is when all community members, institutions, systemic structures, and practices treat each person with justice, fairness, and equality, period. And then you can add a second sentence or any number of other sentences defining what those requisite characteristics are that would get us to is when. I think we need a definition that's very simple and just says, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about is when. I mean, it just seems a little bit of a clumsy way, clumsy way to say that. And also, I'm not sure that that's a sufficient set of circumstances to achieve racial equity.
We're defining it. We're not achieving it yet.
No, but I mean, I'm saying you're saying it's when it's when all people are treated in this way by all these structures. I don't think that's quite enough.
I mean, I'm sorry.
For racial equity. I don't think that achieves racial equity. I think there are other things that are required for racial equity, as I mentioned.
Maybe we can do racial equity in Albany starts when all community members, we can do it that way. This is how it starts. It starts like this, and then we can go into much of the meat of what, into your resources and things like that. So that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's closer to what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I like it, and I do like it better than is when. I think it will create a question about, what it concludes with. If it begins with that, readers will want to know what does it conclude with, and it may well be that we want to, in fact, say something about, what, if it begins here, it ends, at point, if it begins at point A, it ends at point Z, meaning that we've fulfilled it or reached it, and that's fine.
Well, hopefully, Greg, it never ends, but.
I don't mean that racial equity ends, but I'm saying if this is the beginning of the journey, that what does it mean that if we've arrived?
Where will it take us? Exactly, I understand.
And maybe where it says to treat each persons as parentheses, one or two people, or we're just focusing on one person?
We're saying each person, so that's
okay. All right.
To me, grammatically, each person includes every person of a group. Each person's doesn't scan to me because
all
of
right. Maybe I'm sorry, I read the each, so okay.
So
can I just jump in and give you all one food for thought since you're on the person piece? Can we think about what was shared about calling out race? Who are we talking about? I want to push you all for a moment. Who are these people? Who is this person? Because we're now in an everybody mode. Like, let's narrow it down. Who are people based on race? Let's try to narrow that down in your 10 minutes.
So as we think about that, I mean, do we want to say Black and brown, people of color, African descent? I mean, that could go far, how.
So I can imagine, that is one way of embedding it, where, we get a sort of a list, and that would be one way of addressing it. Another way I can see of addressing it is to tie back to, what is it, what's the prior state of racial inequity that it's responding to. So this would be not necessarily a list, but of centering that this accountability is necessary to make up for prior injustice upon racial grounds, which we could spell out in, more or less elaborate or specific terms. Those are two ways that I see of addressing it in the second part of that sentence. There's others.
I think one thing that Nicole stated was that this whole project came because of what happened to, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. They are of Black and African descent. So we may want to state that as the persons that we're referring to, because right now in this country, those are the people that are being targeted for racial injustice and inequality. So, I mean, for the most part, I know there's other groups as well, but this is what has happened in our country these past couple of months. And so do we want to just specifically state those, like you said, or do we want to, I guess if we make it a list and we forget a group, we don't want to offend, right? So, but again, we just need to know that this is why this is happening, because this happened to Black and brown people in this country. So
I think you're right. I think it should be specific.
Okay.
Shouldn't be everybody. That's not what we're doing here.
Right. And because everyone is not affected. Right. It's just that particular group of people are that are being affected at this moment?
Well, I think, I want to remind people we've now been 10 minutes. B, I think I support that generally. I do think we've got to be thoughtful that in Albany, there would be groups that wouldn't necessarily be included under Black and Brown people, depending on how the language is used, who have been directly affected in Albany, including Native Americans and including Asian Americans, where there's, specific, both in terms of, prior uses of the land, but also in terms of deeds. And so I think, we'd want to be careful if we're laying out that, yes, we want to be precise, but we also, some of these are also going to be specific to how we understand the history of Albany. But we're now past 10 minutes, so I just want to ask you all what you want to do. Should we pause here and put a pin in this and take it back to the subcommittees and ask each of them to come back with an overall statement for December, or do you want to keep discussing now?
I'd like to take the subcommittees.
Yeah, Bart, I saw you.
Yeah,
saying.
I was going to say the same thing. Also, I'd like to think about this individually. It's hard to do this with a bunch of us together like this. It's, yeah.
So maybe we can utilize this as the basis for our subcommittees to work on this prior to our December meeting and ask each of them to come back with an overall, not just subcommittee specific area statement.
So can I just add one reminder? So December 1st is your next meeting. However, as consultants, we would need you to provide your input, additional thoughts before that meeting, and it requires some time for us to gather everything and make sure that this is put together, as well as send it over to the city staff to make sure it's in your packet for December 1st, and you have Thanksgiving coming up. So that's where that date of November 11th came from, which is a week from today. And so I don't want you all to feel like you have to finish anything. This is not a finish type of moment. This is just non-closure. And what we want you to do is, now that you've had some more feedback from the community, from us, and from each other, this next week, if you want to go back to your subcommittees, do some wrestling with this piece, and then by the 11th, send to us what you have. And we can still communicate if you need to offline, but send us your draft, right? It's just a draft. It's not necessarily going to be finalized. And what Dr. Holt and I will do after tonight is send you a document that collects all of what you did tonight. Okay, so all your statements are in one place. So I think for Bart, like you said, I just need time individually. I need to process this. So we'll send you one document with all of them in one place, so you can just process our equity statement, give feedback, and I think that will help you all between now and the 11th, if you all are okay with that. And that deadline was really based on because of all of the time we need to get things prepared before your December 1st meeting. And then again, December 1st, we'll give it back to you, and you'll still be able to wrestle with it there, because that's between now and that, between December 1st and that time, you'll have some time to adjust, and we'll give it back to us again. We'll make some revisions, and you can have like a final kind of interim report that you can share with the city council. So I hope that helps a little bit about time frame and process.
All right.
Does that help? Okay.
For that. And do we want to take this back then to the subcommittees? It appears to me so. So that takes us now, we're moving from item 6-1 to item 6-2. This is the Equity Impact Plan Subcommittee Updates. We have updates from 3 subcommittees. In the prior meeting, in order to, we took public comment on all 3 and received public comment about that not being the way that people would prefer it to go. So we'll start with number 1, affordable housing and economic development. So Equity Impact Plan Subcommittee Update by the Affordable Housing and Economic Development. We want to hear from that group, then we'll take public comment, and then we'll take any follow-up from the commission.
All right, I guess I'll jump in. Commissioner Kerr and I work together to discuss our equity statement, which you have in front of you. And again, this is just a draft, as it's stated. I think we were able to fairly bring the language and the verbiage to affect the community in a way where everyone is included. I think that as I read it, I am scratching out things and thinking other words could apply, but I think we had a great start to work together to get this statement for this meeting. So we definitely would welcome feedback and any suggestions to help us to finalize this as well. We also drafted up our survey questions. I'm not going to go through all of them, but, again, this is a draft as well. I think that 12 questions, I think, should be sufficient. I mean, but there again, we would suggest any feedback and comments on those as well. Let me go to my next page. So we had our plan goals, plan goal 1 and 2. So the first goal is to foster a healthy and sustainable urban village. Our objective is to promote housing availability and quality. And as you go through the report, these are some of the things that we were able to pull out. We discussed the rent review program today. And again, that is something that I think this would need to be reviewed urgently, especially in the times that we're in right now. We also had our second goal was to engage our diverse community, connect with and engage in the community. We do have our Albany Cares program that has been going well. I think it'll continue to strengthen over the years to come. Our Albany Project of Hope. We will provide an input of outreach efforts, information on our low income and senior tax exemptions, and so forth. So, like I said, we were able to come together and put, just a brief summary of what we felt were the major topics in developing our subcommittee so it could be successful. And Commissioner Kerr, if you wanted to add anything on it, I think that's where we're at this time.
No, thanks. I think you did a very good job summarizing what we did. The main goal to me is to make sure that we have a document that we can hand off to the incoming commission. And that was my intent in drafting where our amended goals and our work plan will lie. So it's really about capturing the work that we've done and giving it in a summarized document to the incoming commission so that we can take off from there going forward.
All right, thank you. Any preliminary questions or preliminary comments before we go to public comment? Again, we're on the Equity Impact Plan subcommittees and first subcommittee. All right, not seeing any. Now we'll take public comment on this topic. Again, please raise your hand to be recognized. This is on the Housing and Community Development Subcommittee report of the Equity Impact Plan. So if anyone of the public would like to be recognized, please raise a hand. And all right, seeing none, let's return to commissioner discussion. And we'll do commissioner discussion. If we need an action on this, we will, and then we'll move to the second subcommittee report. So any follow-up commissioner discussion, we appreciate, thank you for this submission, and anything that other commissioners want to say about it.
I think I appreciate the public comment earlier and really appreciate the consultant's guidance as well, and that we really need to tailor this and to tie in very closely to racial equity. The language in this document is not nearly as precise as it needs to be, and I think that we can, as a subcommittee, work on that, and we will present that by November 11th.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerr. Any other thoughts that we want to give? Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shelley.
Just for Commissioner Kerr and Commissioner Gary to consider very specifically as you're doing this. I love the way you just you limited the number of questions, recognizing that this is going to be a very long survey, and so think about how we can really hone in. Once you see the document we'll send you, the demographic information is going to already be there. So how can you like not even have to worry? And this is for everybody. You're not going to have to worry about that demographic information. Really, what you want to get down to is what are the maybe 5 to 7 questions that'll really get at the root cause of what is holding these equity issues in place, particularly as they relate to certain marginalized, oppressed, historically marginalized, oppressed, depressed, and suppressed groups that we're speaking of. And so really get down to the nitty gritty and figuring out how are we going to get to the root cause of this issue. So for example, if we're really trying to address our unhoused community, we can have one question that's like a yes, no, or unsure, and then there can be another one that's a fill-in. So, what kinds of resources have been most helpful to the unhoused community, or if you have not experienced this, what kind of resource do you think would be helpful? Should you become unhoused or something like that? So that you're really don't have to worry about it just being quantitative. We can take the qualitative and begin to break that down as well. But really honing in on, what are the power structures that are holding place? What are the financial things that are holding it place? So I think you all have some questions here that you can definitely build from. And if you need any support on that, please feel free to give me a call.
Thank you so much. I do think all of us will face a challenge in trying to figure out how to whittle down, and to the degree we can be thoughtful of that focus, that'll help all of our subcommittees. Eventually, it'll require all of our engagement as we pull them together, whether that's in December or in January, to be thoughtful about how to create a survey that's actually feasible for people to complete. Thank you so much. Any other comments?
Yes, Chair Downs, we're going to need that. It's getting to be that time.
All right, so we are approaching 10 o'clock. Is there a motion to extend the meeting? Commissioner Gary?
I move that we extend the meeting to 10:30.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Marks, any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Kerr? Yes. Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks? And I vote yes. Okay, thank you so much. So I think that concludes then our discussion of the Subcommittee on Affordable Housing and Economic Development. Our next subcommittee, again, we're on item 6-2, Impact Plan Subcommittee Updates, is a subcommittee on schools and youth. So we'll first get a presentation or an update from them, and then we'll take public comment focused on this, and then we'll come back for discussion or potential actions. Do we have an update on the education and youth?
Yeah.
Go for it, Margie. I think you're muted.
We had a meeting on October 22nd with representatives from the high school. There were 13 high school students altogether that were on a Zoom call, a meeting with us. I don't want to, it's late. We have another subject to cover here in this meeting, so I want to be brief. But one of the things that Bart and I came to the conclusion is that we need to do a separate survey for youth, and it needs to be an anonymous survey. That's what the students told us, that we would get the best feedback and the best quality feedback by doing it that way. Also, we talked to them about having, say, like a youth committee, a subcommittee in the school, in the city. And what they felt was that they would rather participate in the commissions that the city has already. They felt that if we did like a separate youth subcommittee, that they would feel as though they were like kids that were sitting at the kids' table at a party. And so they would rather be involved, and they want to be involved and want to know how they can make things happen in city government. One of the things we asked them is what could they celebrate about Albany? What became very clear is that one of the things they all said they could celebrate was that immediately the school board accepted the Diversify Our Narrative movement that was initiated by students, and saw that it would cost $50,000. That didn't stop the school board. They just went ahead They're trying to raise the money. The students saw that as a real positive for their community, and I would agree with them. They also, they felt that it was a student-initiated initiative, so they were really happy about that. They were happy that there were conversations about race that were happening under challenges. One of the things that they said was that Albany is seen as the perfect diverse bubble, but this is more of a desire than a reality. And we have a bit of elitism in that sense. So I thought that was very interesting. They also said that the issues that are going on in the high school start in the elementary and the middle school, so that we really need to do some movement with those age groups. I think, Bart, do you have more? There was a lot of great feedback from the students, and it was very helpful. So Bart may want to add more. Thank you.
I think the thing that was clear was that the students really are quite aware of racism in Albany, and they experience both aggressions and microaggressions, and they're very concerned that when issues arise of racism in the high school and other institutions, that they never find out what happens. That it's never clear that any action is really taken. I think it's important for us to say that we've sort of gone in a slightly different direction because the opportunity presented itself to move quickly to engaging with students. We've really put our energy there rather than in focusing on the equity statement or on the questionnaire. So we have to go back and deal with that. But you know, we couldn't really say no to the opportunity that the school board president and the superintendent gave us to really be involved directly with the students. And it's very exciting. We have some really very interesting and articulate young people in this community. And they really have important things to say, and we need to create opportunities for them to be heard.
Thank you both for that outreach and those discussions and that report back. Any preliminary questions or comments before we go to public comment?
Can I just add one thing that I heard, because we had the blessing of being in that session. It was phenomenal. Absolutely. Just that's one of the best parts of our work, to hear our youth. But I do want to acknowledge that there was outreach to those groups of kids about being a part of SEJC, and also knowing there are openings in Albany, right? There's openings that the youth can consider. So I just want to remind you of your outreach efforts. That was a real great example of direct outreach to the kids. So I do want to encourage you to follow up with the superintendent, with the board president about, hey, let's follow up with those kids. Let's talk to the principals, because those are a group of kids who definitely want to be engaged, and there's great opportunities at the city level to engage with them. So I just want to remind you of that.
Thank you so much. Any others? All right, let's go to public comment. So we're taking public comment right now on item 6-2, subcommittee updates, and this is schools and youth. We'll take public comments and we'll come back for, if anyone would like to be heard, please raise a hand. We will wave you in. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so let's come back to the commissioners. I appreciate that update and that work. Follow-up thoughts from the subcommittee, from the commissioners for the subcommittee. Dr. Shelley.
If there's nobody else, a couple of things as for Member Grossman and Member Marks as they move forward with this. The events were amazing, so I just want to echo that. The comments from the kids were absolutely phenomenal, and we gathered a lot of great qualitative data that we'll be able to use as we build the Equity Impact Action Plan. So some things for you to consider are so we got a lot of information from the kids, but we didn't get a lot of information around education in general, around root causes of some of the issues that are the things that are holding our equity issues in place. We got a lot of impact of our equity issues on the youth. And so intent and impact are two different things. Root cause and impact are two different things. So we got a lot of stuff about the impact of what's happened in the community, but what the kids couldn't do is tie what they were experiencing to policies, procedures, legislation, and systems that we as adults know about. So consider what components from the system change framework that we did not get information on, and then use that as kind of a jumping point to, all right, if we do a survey for the community, what are the other pieces of qualitative or quantitative data that we can gather to help us get to some of that? How can we go deeper with the challenges or root causes that are holding this in place? And then also consider how we can use this information to educate the community at large. Sometimes part of being clear about your what the role of education and racial equity is understanding what side of this you really want to take, because there's so many different pieces that need to be addressed. We can talk about the education with the kids in schools and their experiences with their racial equity or inequity, but is that really the role of the city to get involved in what's happening within the schools, or do we want to take the perspective of we want to shift the community, and part of the way we can shift the community is to help our community understand how local government works and how their involvement in local government can help push their voice forward. And we can really get on that civic engagement route with the young people that want to do this work. And again, it doesn't have to be an either or, but it's just a different way for you to think about how you're going to approach this work. We have to understand and recognize, and we haven't gotten too much into this, that being involved in local government and knowing about opportunities, that's part of privilege. If you don't know how the local government works and you've never been educated on it, it's never been a part of what you talked about at home, how would I ever know? And so part of that equity journey that equity plan could be getting the information out. People cannot get involved with what they don't know about. And so we just want to make sure that this is something that has access to all families. And there's a lot of different ways you can approach the education piece. So just wanted to put a few nuggets in there. And of course, we're here to help.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts? Okay, so we appreciate this update from the Subcommittee on Schools and Youth. Now we move to the next item. This is again under 6.2, Equity Impact Plan Subcommittee Updates. And the third of the subcommittees on policing. Again, we'll have an update. Again, there's a report as a hyperlink at the agenda. Again, we'll have a update from the subcommittee. Any preliminary questions, then go to public comment, and then come back to the overall commission. Commissioner Kerr, do you mind giving this update?
No, I'd be happy to. Thank you. And thank you for the other two reports. They help me sort of frame what I want to talk about. The first point I'd like to make is that the SEJC subcommittee on policing has been misunderstood, I think is a good word, for quite a while in terms of, we had the council council subcommittee trying to set up a committee for the policing. And then we had the Social and Economic Justice Subcommittee to set up policing issues. All of this is about the same conversation. And I think it's a mistake for anyone to feel like there's confusion about what we're trying to do. We're having a broad conversation across the community about what policing means and how we can best achieve racial equity in policing in Albany. We've had some amazing public commentary, and I really respect the people who have commented publicly at the council meetings and people who have commented at our commission meeting. The report that's before you tonight includes some information that was collected by me and by Chair Downs from a variety of sources, including Yale University and policing reform within communities across the country. What we tried to do, I think, was give you a broad perspective on what racial equity will look like in the city of Albany. I think the comments that we received from the public are very well taken, and we will continue our conversation to really really focus this in on racial equity. So the first part, the racial equity statement, will be really streamlined and really tailored to racial equity. The second part of this, which is a very lengthy, way too long list of possible questions for a questionnaire to the community, will also be streamlined and will take away issues related to demographics. We're going to try to really just tailor it specifically. And we'll come back with that for you in December. And then finally, and this is my personal little nugget, I really think that we as a commission owe it to ourselves and to the incoming commission and the incoming council to encapsulate the work that we have done on this. We have worked many long hours. I mean, each of us has put a tremendous amount of personal commitment and personal time, and we've grown, I think, individually and as a commission a lot in this process. And I think it would be wrong of us to not hand this off effectively. So the goal in writing potential work plan addendums, which Sid and Isabel can adopt or not adopt, but the purpose of that is to really just capture the work that we've done and to have respect for the public, for the comments that we've had from the public, and from the work that the consultants and the council as well have done in this topic. So that's my introductory statement, and I'm going to respect the fact that you've all read this report in detail, page by page, line by line, item by item, and you will address any questions you have to our subcommittee. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I don't have much to add to that other than my thanks to Commissioner Kerr for helping focus us on the idea of what exactly we do want to make sure we're turning over to the next SEJC so that they can be making the requests that they need to keep fulfilling these tasks. And for the excellent questions. I do think that we'll certainly need to keep revisiting those questions to think about which of them we might pare down. At risk of overwhelming people taking the survey, but there's a lot of wonderful work there. So appreciate all our leadership on this. Any preliminary questions or comments before we go to public comment? Bart and then Nicole.
If the council's task force gets in motion, it seems like it's focused on policy, police policy. I hope that our group would pick up on is the question of oversight, community oversight of the police. I don't see that necessarily coming out of the task force. And it is a long-range kind of thing that I think needs to be followed through on. Certainly was one of the things that people hit on multiple times in the listening sessions, the need for overview. And so maybe somewhere in your goals, you might talk about the question of what should police overview look like in this community.
Thank you, Bart. I think it's a good point. I think it's, I would personally not be surprised if the task force did take up that question, though, we'll see. So, and we'll see if council ends up finally passing a resolution on the task force. So, but I certainly think it's a valuable to assert some of those long-term goals on the issue of oversight. Nicole, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, it was just a question. I know that everyone did is exactly what Commissioner Kerr said, is read line by line, every single piece of the document. So it was a question really about, I know you mentioned you're going to be paring down the survey questions to really gather, the essence of what you want to hear from the community around safety and policing. And so the question was, I know we've shared a lot of different resources around surveys, and I know you mentioned there's some resources that you looked at. So how helpful, I think for Dr. Holt and I to know, how helpful were the resources we shared around crafting questions? And then I have like a follow-up question to that as well, but how helpful was that in terms of supporting the crafting of questions?
You might be muted, Judy.
Yeah. I was like, I think I read her.
You know, I had input from several different people on the list of questions, and I have to be honest that I did not test those against the ones that you gave us. So that's a task still to be done.
Okay. And reach out if it needs some support on that, is just because there was a lot, by the way. So your group had a lot more, I think, survey information shared and lots of different. So it is a lot, it's overwhelming, but I wanted to make sure that we knew if that was helpful or not. Because when you all send the feedback back to us, we can give a little bit of a lens around what some of those questions could be. And the follow-up question, and I think Dr. Holt shared this earlier, so it's not even a question, maybe more of a comment, is that system change approach. I think is going to be helpful in rethinking those questions, because I think one of you mentioned about, the task force is really looking at this policy piece, right? But then there's these other layers in the system that we have to recall, because I was trying to envision, if I got this survey and I'm a community member in Albany, could I even answer these questions, right? So I want to make sure that you're being mindful of, I know we've talked about the victims of crime, right? We've talked about different perspectives, but there are, several who may not be able to answer any of these questions. So then you don't get good data, right? So we want to really make sure that you have using that system change piece to help you break down some of those questions, I think will be helpful, so that it's not just about policy, but then you can talk about practice, right? You can talk about resources, you can keep going through that so that you get really good data to inform how do we now respond to what the problem is. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so at this point, we'll take public comment. Again, we are on item 6-2, which is the Equity Impact Plan Subcommittees, and we're on the third of the subcommittees on policing or public safety. If you want to be heard, please raise your hand. I see 2 people with hands up, and so if the city clerk can wave them in, please. So Jeremiah, you're on.
Yeah, thank you. This topic actually holds current issue with me right now regarding the Albany Police Department. I think this is a very important survey. I think a member of the community has been bruised and been manhandled and been physically touched, and the police has physically put bruises on my body. They need to make this transparent instead of just hiding behind all their policies. And the members of the community have been injured by the police department, and when members of the community has been caused physical pain by the police department without even being arrested. Yeah, what a great survey, because the police are supposed to uphold by morals and ethics, which we all know those are just words. And these police review, they need to be drug tested every month, and have the public aware of the police department passing drug tests and making sure all the police in our city are clean and sober. And especially when we call their and leave a voicemail message on the police chief on their phone or a certain detective, I think it would be professional that they identify themselves, who they are, their name, and their title. When you call the police chief, it'd be nice if he says it's actually the chief and the name. And when you call a detective, it'd be nice if they said their name and their title. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I see one more hand up, and I think the clerk will be moving in Cheryl Sudduth. If anyone else wants to be heard, please raise your hand. And you're in. Thank you for joining us.
So I'm going to say it again. I've been sitting here this whole time, and then we had this lively discussion just a little while ago, and we sat here and we listened to you guys struggle to even use the words Black, Indigenous, Latino, people of color. You could not come up with that. when you're trying to write your racial equity statement. You just could not come up with Black, Latino, Indigenous, people of color when it came to talking about race. But yet you want to talk about police oversight. When you talk about police oversight, when you talk about community speaking about safety and policing, every one of those community phone calls that were given months ago when this first started, you had people calling in from every culture, every race, saying those very words to you. That it was the Black community members, it was the Latino community members, it was the Indigenous people in your community, in our community, who were the targets of police misconduct in our community. It's not that hard. It's not that hard to say. When you're talking about this racial equity, it's not that hard to say. You cannot talk about racial equity without saying the words of the people who are impacted in the community. You cannot talk about police oversight without talking about the people who are impacted in the community. And you cannot go to the community without recognizing what they have asked you to talk about. Say the words. Say the words. Don't get into this conversation again. Don't have race-focused conversations without illuminating racism. You have to name it, you have to frame it, and you have to explain it. I am one of your representatives on the ACLU board that covers Albany, Berkeley, and the Northeast Bay. I also sit on the Racial Justice Coalition. I also sit on the Racial Justice Oversight Body. This is not something I do for pastime. This is something I take very seriously as a Black, Latina, and Indigenous person. I fit all of those categories, and somebody with a disability, and a Muslim woman. So I fit all of the categories. If we're gonna have race-focused conversations, don't derail it by using the same terms in different ways. Take it seriously. And I'm not hearing that here. I keep hearing this soft pedal speech. Say it. Name it, frame it, explain it. And if you're gonna talk about it in this policing, then talk about it in the policing in a way that means something. And thank you, Ms. Janelle, for saying what you said earlier. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for your comment. I see one more member of the public wishing to be heard. Corey Dosty, you're in.
Hi again. All of the support for Cheryl and her words, complete agreement from me. I want to speak about it being more than policy and oversight, right? Shifting what public safety looks like, right? And shifting jobs away from police, creating traffic folks, creating mental health crisis folks. That's what defunding, right, was all about, was like diverting that we put all this money into police to be these jack of all trades, and they can't be. When we talk about the task force, that's what I'm hoping will go on there, is that it can bring back these recommendations of, hey, there are alternative systems. I don't know if that's only there or if that also fits in your subcommittee on policing, but it doesn't seem to have been on the radar in either place. I'm hoping that community voices can bring it really strongly into the task force. And I think that they will. I think that folks interested in it will be interested in building alternatives to policing. But yeah, I just want to re-raise that because I think it keeps getting lost. And I know I'm not always able to articulate myself again after having said something once. And a lot of this I said back in June, but I want to just thread that back in there. It's not just about changing police policies. I don't think that'll work. And we can't go straight to abolition. It's an ideal. I don't think we'll get there in a couple lifetimes, but I do think that, having it be about police policy and about accountability of police to their policies isn't enough. It's about decreasing police contact with Black people, with trans people, with mentally ill people, with people in crisis, with homeless people, which means shifting who's contacting them to folks who aren't wielding guns and to folks who are trained for that specific population. And yeah, I feel like we have some ideas and examples that are out there. We don't have models where they've been implemented great yet because nobody has the courage to do it. But Oakland's trying real hard, and that's where I was for the past 7 years. And I really want us to not just give up on that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So that concludes the public comment on this topic. So now we'll move back to commissioner discussion and a decision on any further action or whether to leave it back to the subcommittee. Any further discussion? Okay, so I think we've got a lot of things to take back to the subcommittee that we can reflect on as we prepare for our follow-up with the consultants and with the next report. So we have next up, item 6-3 is mental health program discussion led by Commissioner Grossman. I also note that it's 10:26. We have this and we have one more item on the agenda, the UC Village Gill Tract Community Farm vandalism.
I had this put on the agenda simply because I'm very afraid that this is going to be completely forgotten. And Commissioner Kerr said pretty much what I had to say, which is that this is important. We need to be on it. I'm very disappointed that there's no staff report, given that I know there was a meeting with Supervisor Carson's staff, and I think we can't just let this drift around and wait for something to happen, because we have people who need help and we don't have help available. So I'm going to be on the soapbox about this every time we meet until something happens.
Thank you, Bart.
I can provide a verbal update as to what has been done since the last meeting. The mayor, vice mayor, and staff did have a meeting with the City of Berkeley staff and the mayor to just discuss the changes and any, what type of information the City of Berkeley is collecting as far as trying to figure out, to cost out the current services that they are still providing to Albany and gauging interest in moving forward after the fiscal year is over. So conversations are happening. No decisions have been made. We're kind of just, taking it one step at a time at this time.
Thank you, Isabel. Further discussion or preliminary discussion before we go to public comment? Okay, so if there's, so we're on agenda item 6-3 with this update on the mental health program. Is there any public comment on this? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we're back to any follow-up from commissioners. Okay, so seeing Commissioner Kerr.
Just a quick commentary that it's fascinating to me that there's such an intersection between the failure of any real forward movement on mental health and the challenges that we're facing in policing, and these things are not separate. They're part of the same dilemma that we're facing. And I hope that we could assign appropriate priorities to this work. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So we're at 10:29. We have one agenda item to go, and we will need a motion in order to be able to take it up. This is the update on the Gill Tract vandalism. So do we have a motion? Margie.
We don't have a choice but to make a motion. These people, the Gill Tract people, have been waiting all this time. So we need to extend the meeting to finish this item.
Yeah. So do you want to make a motion for a specific time?
I don't know how long it's going to take, because I don't know how many people want to speak. I don't know what.
Okay. So I agree with Margie that while I appreciate the 10:30 goal, Commissioner Gary.
Let's just extend it to 11 o'clock because, like she stated, people are waiting and we don't want to rush them. This is an important topic for them. So if we can just extend it to 11.
Okay, so we have a motion to extend to 11. Is there a second? Margie seconds. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
I'm going to vote no. I'd like to see this agendized as a primary first item on the next agenda in December. No.
Okay, so I vote yes. So the motion carries. And this was a motion submitted by Commissioner Marks. I think she has a statement, and then we'll have any preliminary questions, and then we'll go to public comment. And then after public comment, we'll come back for any follow-up. So the floor is yours, Margie. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, please bear with me while I read this statement. In Albany, before each Social and Economic Justice Commission, the chair of the commission reads what is called an acknowledgement statement. That statement says that we are honored and grateful to be living on traditional indigenous land. Those are just words. It is up to each of us to give them meaning. We are fortunate that we have a resource in Albany where revitalization of indigenous cultural traditions, history, and language takes place right across from our city hall. Over 5,000 years ago, this land was populated by Huishin Indians who used it as foraging grounds. Fast forward to 1889, when a local horticulturist, Edward Gill, established a large plant nursery. After Edward Gill's death, his family sold all 104 acres of land to UC Berkeley. In 2013, UC entered into a 10-year agreement to preserve 10 acres for agriculture. The Gill Tract Farms and Black Earth Farms invited the Segorite Land Trust to share the land and the food. The Segorite Land Trust takes steps to acknowledge the history of this land and contribute to its healing. Just 1 year after the farm was established, they were able to distribute 18,500 pounds of food to the surrounding communities. I want to spell Segorite. It's an Indian word. It's spelled S-O-R-G-O-R-E-A, separate word, capital T-E. The Segorite Land Trust is an urban indigenous women-led community-focused project focused on returning land in Ohlone territory to indigenous stewardship. As they say on the Segorite website, the Segorite Land Trust cultivates rematriation. One project of the Land Trust is a voluntary annual contribution called the Shumai Land Tax that non-indigenous humans living on traditional Ohlone land can make to support the critical work of the Land Trust. Shumai means gift in the native language of the Chochenyo. On the website, there's a calculator. For my family living in Albany in a 3-bedroom home, the tax is $400 per year, tax deductible. My family is going to start paying that, and I would encourage others in Albany to do the same if you are able, or to pay whatever you can. This is one way to take action to redress the ongoing colonization of this land. There have been anti-Black and anti-Indigenous hate crimes at the Gill Tract. Before I talk about the crimes, I want to make it clear that because the Gill Tract Farm is on land that is owned by the University of California, the Albany police have no jurisdiction. The farm is under the jurisdiction of the UC police system. The incidents there have been as follows. In July, an 8 by 10 foot wooden board that said Black Lives Matter sign was defaced with spray paint. The sign was repaired and put back, but it was stolen in August. An artist from the Segorite Land Trust wove a beautiful sign into the chain link fence on the San Pablo part of the farm. The sign read Indigenous Land. On October 7th, the sign was defaced, so it read U.S. Land. The sign was repaired, but on August 17th, what appeared to be two white males in a red pickup completely destroyed the sign. In addition, there was a cardboard sign that read Indigenous Land, Give Shumai, and that was destroyed. There was a fire that was set at the farm, and there was some damage that was done to some of the trees. To other activities on the farm, they run a farmer's market on Sundays from 2 to 5. It's on San Pablo. I would encourage you to support the farmer's market as well. I would be remiss if I did not mention other anti-Black acts recently in our community. Black Lives Matter signs have been defaced. Windows with Black Lives Matter signs had eggs thrown on them, and the African-American candidate for city council had signs taken. I want to get back to that acknowledgement statement we say at the beginning of many of our meetings. If we do not take concrete actions to honor that land, we should stop making this statement. I hope we can agree that we just don't want to talk about things in Albany. We want to really do something about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Any preliminary questions or comments before we go to public comment?
I'd just like, again, to agendize this item for the next meeting and have it be earlier in the evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so members of the public who would like to be heard, I know that there were people who are coming and we appreciate your patience. We'll hear from the members of the public who want to be heard. Please raise your hand and we will call you in. This is on the so I see the first person with a hand up, Corey Dostey, and others who want to be heard, please raise your hand so that you can be waved in. So I'm seeing others coming up, two more after Corey, and Corey, you're in. Thank you for your patience.
Okay. I just wanted to voice my support of having this both tonight because people have been waiting and have waited to speak, and this was put off the agenda for at least once, if not twice, and also having it again earlier in the meeting, since it couldn't be put at the beginning of this meeting. I want to also voice that Shumi is a charitable, tax-deductible gift, so that is helpful in terms of budgeting for some. And as a single renter, one-person household who makes around the median salary in Albany, I think the tax calculator recommended, I think it was $75 a month, but I'm able to pay $100 a month sustainably for me. And yeah, I also want to say that land acknowledgements need to include that these are living people who have always been here and they didn't disappear. Many of them were killed through genocide, and yet they are still here. Their descendants and these people are still here and still alive, and that these lands were not ceded, that they were taken, that it was not consensual that we live here. We are grateful to live on this land, yes, and we must acknowledge that we come here through a history of theft and violence. Thank you.
Thank you. I see 3 more hands up, and the city clerk will wave in the next person. And Shawnee Brown, you should be on. Thank you for your patience.
If Jacqueline is on the call, is it okay if she goes first?
So I don't see a Jacqueline on the attendee list.
Okay, no problem. Cool. Okay. So hi, my name is Najoni Brown. I'm here representing Oakland Community. I'm an educator. I'm an engineer. I'm also a veteran farm educator at the Gill Tract Community Farm in Quail Creek, presently known as Albany. I'm also a land steward with the Segurite Land Trust. And as Marx was saying, you know, we are urban indigenous woman-led land trust that facilitates the practice of rematriation. And that's all about healing our communities from the legacy of colonization, genocide, and patriarchy, as well as white supremacy. Really calling on everyone in this community, this greater Oakland community, to do the work of our ancestors and also to establish a better future for our descendants. We're here in the territory of Huichin, and I'm here a part of the organization that is under the leadership and guidance of Janella Rose and Karina Gold of the Confederate Villages of Lashawn, recognizing that there were people here and still here before settlers, as well as others. And I'm here to talk about a hate crime, not vandalism. This is actually a red truck Toyota Tacoma that, as Mark was saying, defaced signs, stole signs, violently ripped down signs, and this needs to be talked about. And our response from the Gill Tract community and Segurite Land Trust has been to raise awareness around these hate crimes, as well as to make our more visible and larger, to let people know that Indigenous people are still here, to let people know that Black Lives Matter is still here, and also just to talk about the history of white supremacy in Albany and the fact that not everybody was welcome in this town not too long ago, and the importance of paying shumi and supporting your communities. And some of the things that we talk about at the Gill Tract is our community agreements. So what we really want out of this is to have a conversation with these two men with the license plate 71962V1 and talk to them. You know, why would you do this? And what was your intention? What are you trying to prove here? Because at the end of the day, we're here to practice restorative justice. We're not here to ostracize or kick out people unless they really don't want to be a part of a community. Some of the things that we've been talking about is to have the city as well as its residents to have conversations about what it actually means to do things that confront white supremacy in the history of places like Albany, places that have been sites for this historic injustice, as well as acknowledging that there has been a lot of intolerance and prejudice around the history of Albany, and things haven't, as I said, things haven't always been safe for everyone. And the last thing that I want to say is that we're taking a lot of steps with groups like our anti-oppression working group to make sure that people are held accountable and to make sure that we're implementing restorative justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see 3 more people with hands up, and the city clerk will bring in, I believe Cheryl Sudduth will be next. I'll let you know when it looks like you should be on. Thank you for your patience.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Marks. As I started out when we first started this meeting, I believe I made the comments that it was not enough to recognize that you're on this land without doing something about it in real. We can mourn the displacement of the Ohlone, but in essence, we also have to recognize that the Ohlone people are here and living. We must still, in the same breath, celebrate that, you know, there's a continued public presence of the descendants who are working to preserve and nourish the indigenous identity of the Ohlone people here. It's over 250 years, almost 300 years since this land was taken away, stolen violently, as most native lands were stolen violently across this nation. We can't whitewash that history. It is very important that, as I said a few minutes ago, that if we are serious about dealing with racism, that we name it. We name it, and we frame it, and we have these hard conversations. We are all here now, and we're living on this land, and we are inheritors of its past. And in order to have a future, we have to recognize that. We have to be remembered by those who came before us, and those who will come after us. And I appreciate the efforts that are being made to ensure that that legacy is going to be one that is more positive than the one that came before us. So there is a connection to the land that we live on that cannot be denied. We can't revive the past, but we can try and hold space for what is in the present and what will come in the future. It is up to us to make sure that we know what that is. We can remember what the Ohlone did so that we can build that heritage in a different way. But we cannot do that by denying what we know to be true. We need a stronger sense of the place that we call our home now, but that we don't inherit. We never inherit the earth, we only borrow it. And we need to make sure that we understand that and we honor it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. We have two more people with hands up. I think the clerk is moving in Julie Winkelstein, and I will let you know you should be live. Thank you for your.
Yep, hi, this is actually Dave, taking over for Julie. Good evening. First of all, I want to thank Margie for bringing this up to our attention formally like this. And I know that SEJC has lots that they're taking responsibility for, but I think when we're talking about social justice, the folks in our community, the Gill Tract, should be considered, especially given what's happened over there. How that should take place, I don't know, and maybe that's something we should have set up at a future meeting, like in December, to discuss as a group. Maybe make some proposals or whatever. I would be curious to know how the Albany police interact with the UC police in terms of the two people that committed these acts, and how we work together to try to assist the folks in the Gill Tract community, our neighbors, in trying to get some justice for what's happened. So any way we can move ahead, I think would really be good. And again, thanks, Margie.
Thank you, Dave. And I see one more hand up. The city clerk will move in Paul Bernstein. If anyone else wants to be heard, please raise your hand before the speaker is concluded. You should be live. Thanks for your patience.
Hi, I'm Paul Bernstein, a member of the Gill Tract Farm community. I want to thank Margie for supporting us and bringing this issue to this body. And I want to thank the members of this body for giving us the time to present our story and the issues at hand. You know, basically Najoni Brown addressed, and Margie addressed a lot of the issues. I just want to reinforce a couple of things. One is that it would be something that could be considered by this commission to publicize the Shumee land tax to the Albany community. It could be done maybe through the weekly emails that go out to the community, or other, maybe post it on the website as a concrete action to support Indigenous people in our community, broader community in the East Bay. The second thing is that it was touched on earlier about restorative justice and transformative justice as an alternative to the present criminal justice system. Again, I want to support Najoni in making the statement that we do not want to prosecute the two men who and the other people who stole this, defaced the signs at the Gill Tract and also stole the sign. The goal is to have conversations with people to try to build an understanding of where each side's coming from and move towards hopefully agreement that there's a way to take out or to discuss differences, to handle differences that could be much more productive for everybody. So another thing for the commission to consider is promoting the ideas of restorative and transformative justice and in our communities as a way to solving disagreements. Thank you.
Thank you for your contributions, and thanks to all the members of the public. At this point, there are no further hands from the public, so we come back to the commissioners for discussion. And Commissioner Marks, I wonder if you could help frame us. I appreciate all your work in bringing this forward and your patience and the patience of all the people from the public. I want to ask if you could clarify, I'm sure you said this before, Preston, what is it that, from your perspective, you would like for the commission to do as action in response to this?
Well, the Gill Tract community would like support from the greater Albany community, paying the shumai, going to the farmer's market. Those kinds of things would really help the Gill Tract community. They're in a fundraising thing now. They want to raise $61,000 so they can have better distribution for the food that they raise. So, mainly they want people to know about the Gill Tract, what they do there, and what happened there too. The hate crimes that happened there. So if the city, I don't know if we could put it on the city website about the farmer's market or the shumai tax, that kind of thing. If we could do that, that would be great.
Thank you, Margie. Comments from other commissioners? Go for it, Bart.
Could there be a piece in the weekly e-news about the Gill Tract and the various other aspects of this, including the tax? Would that be possible? I'm asking staff, I guess.
Typically, the e-news is for city services and events, and we don't necessarily use the e-news to advertise or do outreach on other organizations in the city.
Well, you said city news and city events. That seems to qualify.
No, city, the government city like city staff and.
Okay, well, I mean, it seems to me there have been stories about events that are run by various other organizations over the years, but I don't see what the big problem would be of doing that.
Commissioner Gary and then Commissioner Marks.
I'm in agreement as well. As I was scrolling through Facebook, I see that the city Facebook is underutilized. So and to the point where can we use that platform to educate the community, possibly providing a history of the land and what they're asking for, just to kind of promote what is needed in the community. I mean, again, that is in Albany's city limits, no matter who police it, it's a part of our community. And so is that an option? Can we put it on Facebook, LinkedIn, just get it on the social medias? And it doesn't have to be all the time, but I think at this moment, at this time, especially in the state of our city, it needs to be out, and our community needs to know that this is what's happening in our community and this is what is needed to help.
Commissioner Marks.
I would just like to say, I think I've seen things from the Solano Avenue Association or from the Chamber of Commerce that have been on the weekly email. And to me, this is, more important than that. I mean, I don't want to, I think that honoring this land, I mean, we say it before city council meetings that we honor this land. we really need to take some action to really actually honor it.
And I think I would share Commissioner's hope that we could find a way, and perhaps, staff could work with Commissioner Marks to see if there is a way to, include information, in an appropriate manner, and work with Commissioner Marks on language for that, as a way of helping to disseminate word, which seems to be the key thing that Commissioner Marks asked of us, to get the word out to the degree that through the ways that we can. Anything else that I don't mean it like that? Other comments from commissioners? Okay, well, I think it's the hope of at least many of the commissioners that can come to pass, and that staff can work with Commissioner Marks to help to utilize city communications to help to get out word of what takes place at the Gill Tract Community Farm. I want to express my gratitude to the members of the public for their patience, both in chronological and from both forms of chronological time, both in the time it took for us to get this on the agenda and in the time it took to get to us today. I appreciate their patience. And that'll conclude 6-4, unless I'm missing anything else. Commissioner Gill.
Well, I guess my question is, I don't want to leave this without saying how can the city work with Commissioner Marks? I mean, can you, Sid or Isabel, at least, say that this is workable, that's doable? I mean, I just don't want to just say our hope is that you can. What can we do to get moving on this, to educate the public and help bring awareness to what's going on?
We'll research and get in touch with Commissioner Marks on next steps.
All right, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the follow-up on both sides. And thank you again, Margie, for bringing this forward and for your persistence and patience. Future agenda items, item 7. Any future agenda items from commissioners for the December meeting? I assume we'll have updates from each of the subcommittees, as well as continued discussion based on those subcommittees on the racial equity statement and on the survey. Anything else that people want to agendize for the next meeting? Commissioner Gary.
I just wanted to answer my question now. I know at some point we had questions coming in from the community. We still have questions coming in community. So I guess, are we answering them as they come still? Is that still a project that's ongoing and we're posting them so it's visible to the public? Is that still going on, or can you give us a status on that?
So request for an update on the FAQs and where they stand. Is that something that either Sid or Isabel, is there a quick answer to that right now, or do we need to agendize that for next meeting? I see you speaking, Sid, but I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, let's talk about that for the next agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else that you all want to agendize? Commissioner Kerr.
Yeah, I just want to keep us on track with mental health programming and services. And I really would like to request that we have some kind of report from Alameda County, some representative, some formal acknowledgement of the fact that the city has undergone a substantial transition to a new format in programming. And we're entitled to understand what that means, and whether that's provided by the county, which I would prefer, County Mental Health Services, or by Keith Carson's office. I'm not sure where it will best come from, but I think that the public in Albany and this commission in particular are the forum for that to happen. And I'd like to have that on our agenda, either for December or sometime in the first part of next year.
All right. Thank you so much. Any further agenda items? Commissioner Gary.
I had another quick question. So I know our meetings last pretty late. I mean, is there a reason why we have to start at 7:30? Are there other meetings ahead? I'm just trying to see how we can move it up 30 minutes or an hour, if that's a possibility? I'm just asking.
The meeting time is determined by resolution of the city council. So a request would need to, any adjustments would have to come from the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so as we're up against the meeting time, our next meeting is December the 1st, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. It says City Hall or virtual meeting, but I'm virtually sure it'll be virtual. Look for agendas and updates on the city website. With that, this concludes this meeting of the Albany SEJC. Thank you for all of your participation and investment. Thank you to the commissioners for their time. Thank you to the public, and thank you to staff for keeping everything moving. So have a good night. Thank you so much.